Fitzpatrick takes the snap, drops back, lobs it back right corner. Decker! He's got it! Touchdown! Eric Decker scores! And the Jets have won it in overtime!
This is the Jet Take with Ben Blessington and Kyle Fahey.
Welcome back to another episode of the Jet Take. I'm your host, Ben Blessington. Really quickly, normally Kyle Fahey's my co-host. Tonight it's going to be Scott from Play Like a Jet podcast. I'll introduce him in just a second. Kyle is all right. It's just he has no power since the Hurricane Irma in Florida, but he's fine. He should be back next week if all goes according to plan, but he's okay. Everybody, his family's all good, but no power for him right now, so I guess we're going to have a week without Kyle. As I said, my name is Ben Blessington. You can follow me at Ben W. Blessington on Twitter. You can follow the show at The Jet Take on Twitter. We're also on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at the same handle. And you can listen to our podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, a bunch of other ones. You can also find us on Turn on the Jets. That is our recent, I guess not so recent anymore, but our partnership with them. We're on their website. Kyle and I both write on it. Kyle's been doing it a little bit more since I've been busy, but I hope to write on that a bit more as we get going. But all our episodes are on there as well. All right, I think that's it for all the plugs. Again, thank you for all the listens you've given us. We've been killing it in the downloads. So thank you for that, and I guess we'll get going with the show. So without further ado, Scott from Play Like a Jet podcast. How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm glad to hear that Kyle's doing okay down in Florida. Spoke to him earlier, and it seems like like you said, he doesn't have internet, but everybody's all right. So that's the most important thing. The show will soldier on, but the more important thing than the show is that Kyle's okay, and hopefully he'll be back next week. And, listen, there are a lot of people that unfortunately really suffered a lot during Hurricane Irma, and obviously before that, the hurricane down in Texas, Hurricane Harvey. So, thoughts and prayers with everybody. But, yeah, as far as Kyle goes, just glad he's all right.
Yeah, our thoughts and prayers to everybody in that area that was affected by the hurricane, and especially Harvey and Irma, and I know Hurricane Jose or whatnot. It's been a rough time. As Kyle and I were talking earlier, I mean, his city is underwater and mine is on fire because there's been a lot of fires around us. So I guess the world is coming to an end. But in the midst of that, we have time to talk some terrible Jets football. So Scott,
Armageddon.
It's Armageddon. Hey, we signed him, and then I think we cut him. So he was only on
right.
Okay. All right, Scott. I mean, let's unpack this loss. In the midst of all this, let's talk about it. Obviously, the Jets lost to the Bills. I guess we'll go instant reaction. Scott, I'll start with you. We're gonna talk about, we're gonna go position by position and talk about, individual performers who played well, who didn't play well. We'll break down Todd Bowles and some of his coaching issues. But just instant reaction, just your first thoughts before we delve into some specifics.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it kind of was what it was. Joe Caporoso had a great line in his rant that he did the other day at turnonthejets.com talking about what happened in the game. And he said something along the lines of, you can think that a team's going to be this bad, you can watch them in the preseason, you can hear reports, you can look at the roster and kind of make that formulation, but it's a whole other thing between that and then physically seeing it out there during a live regular season game and realizing just how bad this team is. It's a terrible football team. And, yeah, there are some guys on here, like Jamal Adams obviously played very well, especially for a guy making his first NFL start. Robbie Anderson seemed to get some separation, so when there's actually a quarterback in that can get the ball to him, that may help. There are other guys on the team that were playing well. Josh Martin, I know Daniel Essen over at turnonthejets.com did a film room there, and he obviously played fairly well. There were, Coney Ely, who they just picked up, who the Patriots cut. He looked good. And on down the line, there were handfuls of guys. There's maybe a handful of guys that were good individually. But this team's terrible. They can't score at all. They can't move the ball. Matt Forte looks like he couldn't be more finished. I mean, if I may go back to Chandler Bing from Friends, he couldn't be more finished. He is toast. You know, he's completely done, and he looks like he's got. I was talking to David Aiken from TurnOnTheJets.com about this too. He looks like he's got weights tied to the bottom of his feet, like it's like anchors at the bottom of the ocean. That's how slow he's running. John Morton, I don't know what the hell he was doing the way he was calling plays, and Bilal Powell was barely used until late. And then obviously, as has always been the case the last couple of years, when Powell gets in, he's productive, but it takes forever for him to get in the game. Mo Wilkerson looked like he was half asleep, which is a continuation of last year, and that's a huge problem. Leonard Williams didn't put up huge numbers on paper, but he was all around the place, so he was being his usual self. And then you had the linebackers. I mean, let's be real about this. Darren Lee, we heard all the excuses. He picked a fight with me on Twitter, actually, in the off season over a comment that I made. But we heard all the excuses, Ben, about he was injured last year and he was learning a new system and this and that. Well, he looked just absolutely horrendous. Him and Demario Davis, they couldn't cover running backs. They couldn't cover linebackers, and it was just bad. And so overall, the thing about it was, and this is another thing Joe Caporoso said, and I said this after the game as well, let's be real about this. The Jets were hung in there the whole way score-wise, but I felt like there was never any point in that game where the Bills were in any serious danger. I felt it was just one of those things where the Jets would hang around and be close enough, but they were never going to be able to strike and score points and overtake the Bills, which is especially funny because the Bills are not a good team. They're probably one of the worst 5 or 10 teams in the league this year. They're horrible. Tyrod Taylor, he's not an elite quarterback, but he played pretty well. He didn't put up super flashy stats. There was another touchdown he should have had that went through Charles Clay's hands and into the hands of Justin Burst. And by the way, Ben, I don't know about you, but to me, the thing that spoke to the day more than anything was that Burst interception where he's running it back for what should have easily been a pick six, and he tripped over his own man. That's the Jets in a nutshell. So
yeah,
that's basically.
That
go
play
ahead,
frustrated me. No, obviously no. I'm loving this. I'm loving this rant. But that play frustrated me. But it looks like I watched it again. I mean, on first glance, I was all mad. I was like, how did his own teammate tackle him? But after watching it, I mean, Marcus May literally just got pushed. I think it was an offensive lineman or Clay or somebody just
Sure.
threw Marcus May into him, and then he just kind of fell. So it's one of those fluky plays. Still a good. I mean, but then you look at it. I mean, Clay should have had that touchdown. I believe that was him. It was kind of just a drop. I mean, it was a bad throw, and then he dropped it. So the Jets get lucky there, but, you have to run those back. The Jets, I mean, that should have been a 105-yard pick six, but a great play by the Bills to just kind of throw his man into it. So, that play sucked, but it was at least like, okay, at least it was a positive play, but of course the Jets had to train out and punt. I'll let you finish, and then I'll break down unless you're done.
No, I mean, that's pretty much what I was going to say. I mean, I agree as far as it being a positive play overall, but I thought the whole thing was a microcosm because, of course he tripped over his own guy, and then the idea, it's the symbolism of it, and then, of course, the fact that they went 3 and out after that. And Josh McCown really, we'll talk position by position, but he is what he is, right? He's a guy that's good enough to not be embarrassing and bad enough to not get in the way of the tank, which I guess is really the main objective. And this is kind of what I said after the game is that, and Dalton Osorio said something to this effect as well. Look, the emotion that came over me watching this was not anger. I wasn't upset. I just was apathetic. I didn't care because at a certain point in the game, you came to grips with the fact that for as bad as we thought the Jets were going to be this year, they're going to be even worse somehow. I don't know how that's possible, but they're going to be even worse. And so what you have to realize is what we've, again, all kind of known all along, but some of us have sort of tricked ourselves into thinking something else or, hey, let's root for this team or whatever. I'm not saying don't root for them to win games, but what I'm getting at is the season begins April of 2018. This season, I mean, they may as well forfeit the season. Seriously. I know this sounds ridiculous, like, it was one game, but this is kind of what we've known all along, that they were not taking 2017 seriously as far as trying to compete, and that's fine. I'm all for that because I think, especially this year, where you have not one, not two, not three, if I may do the LeBron James thing, but four guys that may very well get picked in the top 10 at the quarterback position. And Jeff Lloyd and Dalvin Nasario will talk more about this on draft season. And Jeff, if you're not following Jeff Lloyd, by the way, on Twitter, do it right now because he's my favorite draft analyst. I'm not just saying that because we're friends, but he really has his finger on the pulse. In fact, Ben, you and he had a huge agreement as far as the quarterback class last year. Both of you, I believe that Deshaun Kaiser was the number one quarterback, and he's looked pretty good so far. So you should be following Jeff. But Ben, I think that's really my takeaway is that I'm going to be approaching this season where I'm watching the games because I have this illness called being a diehard Jets fan, and I can't help myself. But ultimately, if I wasn't a diehard Jets fan and I didn't write for a Jets website and do a podcast for a Jets website and so on and so forth, I would not be watching these games because if you're not a Jets fan or a Bills fan, you tell me how on earth you could have sat through that game and actually enjoyed it. I don't care how much you like football.
No, yeah, I mean, look, I guess I'll start breaking that down, but you're spot on there, everything you said. Yeah, I guess my initial thoughts was it was ugly, but I think there were some positives, and as you said, I mean, the only reason we're watching this as Jets fans is, look, let's see these young guys play. I mean, as you said, I mean, the fact that Matt Forte is playing, I mean, honestly, just put him on IR right now. Like, even though he's not injured, just I mean, if you don't want to cut him and take that penalty, just put him on IR or bench him for the rest of the year. The fact that Elijah McGuire got 0 snaps was, you know, after a pretty solid preseason. I mean, he didn't play too much in the preseason, but for when he did play, I mean, he looked pretty solid. You know, that just pissed me off. You're watching it for the young guys. You're hoping to see guys like Elijah McGuire and Bilal Powell. I guess Bilal Powell's not too young. So Elijah McGuire to play well, Jamal Adams, Marcus May to play well, Darren Lee, who unfortunately didn't play that well, Leonard Williams, guys like that to look, play well, you know, give you a framework, you know, for your team in 2018. And yeah, it's amazing that we're literally talking about this after one game, but what you preferably want is so you walk away from this season, you know, either you go to the playoffs, which isn't probably going to happen, definitely not going to happen, or you get the first overall pick. But anything in between is not good unless you're wanting to trade up. As you mentioned, there are 4 quarterbacks. So, I mean, even if the Jets did win 5 games, they'd still probably get a solid quarterback. But I think as a Jets fan, it's been too long. It sounds bad to say, but it's been too long since they've had the number 1 overall pick. That ability to get the next, you know, the next Andrew Luck or the next Peyton Manning, you know, give them that ability, give them the pick of the litter, make them pick their guy. And we're going to talk about who should be making that pick, if McCagnon should still be around, if Bowles should still be around. But we're going to talk about that in a second. We'll finish these breakdowns and we'll go position by position. But look, I mean, yeah, you want to walk out of this season with, you know, maybe 1-15, 2-14, get the number 1 overall pick. And I'll just say this, you know, I think it was at Drew from Jersey on Twitter, who's a good follow as well. He just said, cheer for 16 wins, expect 16 losses. It doesn't matter what you do. Whatever's going to happen on the field is going to happen. So that's kind of my state of mind is I'll cheer for the Jets. I'm expecting 16 losses. But, you know, I'm still going to be happy when they win. I just hope they don't win like 5 or 6 games and put themselves out. But, you know, hopefully they get the overall pick. And then you walk out with, hey, look, Elijah McGuire can be our starting running back, and some of these receivers like Ardarius Stewart and Chad Hansen can be guys that, you know, contribute in the future and, you know, et cetera. As far as Josh McCown, I thought he played well really until you notice he played well until he needed to win the game, until the end of the game where he threw 2 interceptions, which is exactly what the Jets are paying. I mean, he's not going to lose them games normally, but as soon as the Jets had to rely on him and start throwing the ball and had to push it down the field, that's when he threw 2 interceptions. But, I mean, besides that, I mean, up until the third quarter, we get Pro Football Focus sends us some stats. They sent us something. Let me find it here really quickly. It says, this is just This is a quote straight out of the email, so I'm going to read it off, but I'm making sure to cite my source. That's from Pro Football Focus, John Gatta, Gatta, I don't know. Until the late third quarter came around, Josh McCown was having himself a decent game. He only had one negatively graded throw up until that point. Even though the Jets didn't allow much pressure, that is when he crumbled. When under duress, McCown was 2 for 6 for 16 yards, 2 interceptions, and 1 sack. He had a 2.8 passer rating when he was under pressure. When he faced no pressure, he was 24 for 33, 171 yards, and an 84.3 passer rating. So McCown, when he was under pressure and when he was having to throw the ball and move it downfield and go through his reads, he was not that good. But, I guess, for what the Jets are doing, I liked it. I would much rather see Petty or Hackenberg, either be amazing or just suck.
Right.
But I guess we're fine with that. And let me just say, honestly, the best case scenario for the Jets, if you're being really wishful thinking, is that you have Petty or Hackenberg come in and they play really well, and then you can actually win some games and hope some guys are around. Then you can actually full-on cheer, hey, I want the Jets to win games, and you never know what can happen. Maybe a 2013 situation where the Jets hang around. But that doesn't look like it's going to happen, not just because those quarterbacks aren't getting in, but it doesn't look like the Jets have that guy on the roster unless Bryce Petty plays like he did in that third preseason game the entire season. So as far as McCown goes, about what you expected, I would like to see a little less than 39 passes, which is what he threw. But, as they said, up until that third quarter, he was having a pretty solid game. The other guy I was really impressed with was Jermaine Kearse. I thought he looked fantastic. Excuse me. As far as a guy who just got to the team, I was more excited about the Sheldon Richardson trade because we were getting a second-round pick, and I was literally just saying, if you can get a second-round pick for Sheldon Richardson, do that. But the Jets ended up getting a second, and they get a guy in Jermaine Kearse who can at the very least be, right now he's going to be the best receiver on the team, or at least the number one wide receiver. But at the very least, he can be a guy that can stick around. He's not too old, and he's, he definitely provided McCown's safety valve. It seemed Kearse had 7 catches. He caught every time he was thrown to, or every time he had a catchable ball. 59 yards, he had an 18-yard pass, and I just thought he looked good. Will Tye was the other guy who looked good as far as a guy who just came off the streets, 3 receptions, 34 yards. Besides that, I wasn't too impressed with anybody else. Anderson, if the Jets had, as you said, a guy who could push the ball downfield, which McCown can't, I think Anderson would have had a better game. And the only time I can really recall them pushing it down the field to Anderson was the time there was an interception, and Robbie actually almost, made a play on that ball. He ripped it out at the end, but
and he had no business making that play either. So the fact that he came so close is a testament to him.
No, yeah, for sure. I think that, look, I was more impressed with Kearse. I like what Tye did, and even Tomlinson to an extent. What Tye and Tomlinson did, as far as being backup tight ends, looking forward to Austin Seferian-Jenkins and Leggett to come back as our starting tight ends. And I guess I liked Ardarius Stewart had one play that I really liked and thought he scored a touchdown. But yeah, McCown, basically what we expected. Running backs, I thought, I should probably stop doing this before we get into our positional breakdown. So we're going to do this in a second. Defensively, I liked what I saw from Coney Ealy. I liked Leonard Williams' play. Muhammad Wilkerson looked terrible. I thought Adams had a really good game. May this is kind of what I predicted going into the season, is that I thought Adams and May were both going to struggle at times. Hopefully, more success than struggle. But I thought that Adams would definitely have less hiccups, and he would kind of be a guy who could really by the end of the season, show that he's a superstar. And May would get there, but it's going to take him a while. I think May is going to have some more hiccups. Just because you have to remember that he's doing a lot more of the coverage stuff, which you can argue is harder. Adams isn't just an in-the-box safety, but he's doing a lot more stuff down the line, down the line of scrimmage. Whereas May is having to look at the coverages, and he got confused on a guy who came in motion in the red zone. He allowed a touchdown. So May and Adams both had some solid stuff, but some stuff to work on, and definitely the most disappointing player. I guess we'll hop into that. But overall, we're going to hop into most disappointing player and guys we liked. But overall, I thought it was a disappointing win. I like some of the stuff I saw. The most disappointing thing, though, was the coaching, that Todd Bowles has not grown at all. I was making the argument, hey, look, he's seen it all in his 2 years in the NFL. His first year, everything went right. I thought, hey, look, even in that season, they hit a low point and he brought them back, or at least, their confidence is when they fell to 5-5, he brought them back, and then he had 2016 where he's having, 3 different quarterbacks play. They look terrible. It's a team with high expectations. They're not playing well, upset veterans, locker. I was like, hey, look, this guy's pretty much seen everything. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt here. Maybe he can grow, but he just really didn't show that. He made the exact same mistake that he was ridiculed for that happened against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it was funny. I even had that thought. I think it was about 11 minutes to go in the game, and I was just thinking, if the Jets get to a 4th down around now, if Bowles punted it, there's all hell's going to break loose. And I think it was the next drive that he actually punted. Anyways, but ugly loss. Most disappointed in Bowles. I like some positives, but definitely this is not the most talented team we've ever seen, but it's not. I don't think it's as bad as everybody's making it out to be. I saw some teams that were a lot worse on Sunday, or at least
This is where I'm going to disagree with you, dude, because I think they may actually be worse than people are making it out to be, but we'll get into that as we go position by position.
I guess let's get into that right now, because, I could hear your argument that, look, the Bills are not that talented of a team, and the Jets looks bad against them. That's the argument I can understand, but as far as if this team gets the number 1 overall pick, I still think they have some nice pieces to work with. I think, if you gave this defense to a team with a competent offense, that team would go, places. I don't think this defense is as terrible. They definitely did not play that well. They allowed, 224 yards to Taylor, and they had allowed, over 100 yards rushing. But I still think on paper this team looks good on the defensive side of the ball, or at least has some, positives. I like the 2 safety duo. I like some of the pieces on the defensive line, specifically Leonard Williams. The linebacking core, I was really looking forward to seeing Darren Lee, but he's not looking too good. But I think they have some, young outside linebackers in Josh Martin and Jordan Jenkins. But, I don't think this team is the worst team I've ever seen. I don't think they're good. I'm not trying to make the argument that they're good. I'm just saying, give it another year, and in 2018, I don't think the Jets are still going to be tanking in 2018. I think after you get them a quarterback, you give them a full draft, maybe add a few young guys. They'll have a lot of money. Maybe a new head coach, and I think you could be looking at a team that could be middle of middle of the league. But why do you think this team is worse than after one game? Why do you think this team is worse than given credit for? And I may add that the Jets do not play well on the West Coast, and they're traveling to Oakland, one of the best teams in the NFL.
Yeah.
So we're going to play one of the best teams in the NFL in a region we suck at, and that is just not a recipe for success for the New York Jets. So if the Jets looks bad in this game, I think you could see one of the worst games this coming Sunday. But anyways, what were you going to add there?
Well, I think as far as I don't know that I would say they're worse than they're giving credit for, so much as I think they're worse than maybe we all kind of imagined in our wildest dreams. And I think with Curse, I think he plays fairly well given the circumstances, and I think he's a decent, number 3 option on a good team. But for the Jets, he becomes the most reliable receiver, and that's kind of a scary situation. I don't know that he's a building block type of guy. I don't even know that he's going to be around beyond this year. Robbie Anderson is a guy that's flash potential, but here's really what the problem is going forward. And David Aiken, who's one of my favorite Jet writers, and I'm not just saying that because he writes for us at TurnOnTheJets.com, he wrote a piece about how Maccagnan's plan is very flimsy and it's held together very lightly. And the big takeaway is that he's kind of banking on some of these draft picks and the younger players being able to step up and then, supplement them with the draft next year and spending some money in free agency. And obviously they're going to have to do that, right? They're going to have like $90 million in cap space. They're going to have to sign guys, and they're going to have to make the most of their draft capital. Of course, what has to be kept in mind is that you don't win by wildly spending in free agency. The analogy that I've always used, and Corey Griffin from NBC Sports kind of got a kick out of this, if the draft is Costco, then Stop and Shop is free agency. And what I mean by that is you do the bulk of your shopping at Costco, you stock up, and then the stuff that you might need here and there as fill-ins throughout the week, I ran out of bananas, all right, I'll go to Stop and Shop. That's what free agency is for. It's supposed to be, you those little pieces that you didn't, that you need to supplement your core with. That's what you throw that into. The problem with Maccagnan's plan is if some of these guys don't turn out to be productive players, he's got a big problem, because then he's going to have to really hit on all of his picks next year, or the vast majority of them, because if you look at what he's got right now, like, okay, let's take a look at the offensive line. So if Brandon Shell, and I'm still optimistic about some of these guys, but let's say Brandon Shell doesn't take that step forward and he ends up playing poorly, right? Or Wesley Johnson doesn't play well. And you know, you, at the other tackle, we don't know what's going on. So you get yourself into a situation where now, you know, with Kelvin Beachum, I hope, you know, who is a former guest of this program, and I hope he does well, and he seems by all accounts to be a really good guy, and hopefully he bounces back. But there's question marks around him because he played poorly in Jacksonville after his injury last year. Well, now you're looking at a situation where you may have to rebuild that entire offensive line again, and at the wide receiver spot. All right, well, Robbie Anderson looks like he may be something, and if he takes a step forward, cool, but maybe he doesn't. And as far as Stewart and Hansen, they look like they've got some potential, but we don't really know. They may not do anything. And you go on down the line, and what if Jordan Leggett doesn't pan out, and on the defense doesn't turn this thing around? And how good do we think Martin and Jenkins are going to be, and what if Mo Wilkerson doesn't turn around? So there's just so many question marks with this team. I think you're right in the sense that there are guys here that could be pieces that you could use to build on going down the line, but there's so few that we know for a fact are going to be reliable pieces to build on, and I think that's a big problem. The big thing, obviously, is they've got to get this quarterback thing right. And you mentioned about the first pick. Obviously, the last time the Jets had the first pick, and everybody will talk about this, and already wise-ass reporters have been writing about it, was 1997 when Peyton Manning decided to go back to Tennessee for his senior year and bypassed the draft that year and came out the next year and went to the Colts, and the Jets ended up trading down twice and picking James Farrior, and obviously we know that Farrior ended up going on to become a really good player with the Steelers. With the Jets, he was kind of mediocre, and then Peyton Manning went on to be one of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of the league. The thing about it is, though, when you have the number one overall pick, even if you have a choice of 4 different guys that you think could be franchise quarterbacks, the ability to have your pick of any of them is a major leverage play in the sense that, okay, so let's say, Ben, that the Jets get to the table draft day and they say, okay, here's the thing. You've got all 4 of these quarterbacks, presumably. Who knows? Somebody could drop in, drop out. We don't really know how that process is going to play out because, as Jeff Lloyd and I always joke, is a long way from September to April. You just never know what's going to happen along the way. There's the combines, there's the whole season, there's the bowl season, there's so many things that could happen. Injuries pop up. But at this moment, it looks like the 4 guys that could go top 10 at quarterback.
My apologies. Yeah, Scott, sorry, you cut out there for a second. I accidentally pressed the mute button, so sorry, continue.
Oh, no problem. Technical difficulties. But, no, so the 4 guys
actually, what it was is I forgot to set it to lecture mode before we had the callers call in, so when the caller called in, he was unmuted, so I was like, oh, wait, hold on. But sorry, continue with what you're adding.
No problem. But, yeah, no, so you assume that the 4 guys as of now that might go in the top 10 at quarterback are Josh Allen, Josh Rosen, Lamar Jackson, and Sam Darnold, right? So let's say you sit down and you say, okay, we like all 4 of these guys. We'd be happy with any of the 4, right? So now you're sitting at number 1. Let's say there's some team that really loves Josh Rosen, right? Just as an example. But you've decided, you know what? We like Rosen, but we like all these quarterbacks pretty close. So there's not, to us, not a huge difference between Rosen or Darnold or Jackson or Allen, right? So now you have the ability, if you want, to trade back to 2 or 3 or 4, get a whole bunch of draft picks in the process, and still get one of the quarterbacks you like. Having that top pick gives you so much leverage and so much ability to really make some moves and get who you really want. It's a huge thing to be able to have, and so that's why. And look, we saw this. I mean, even you referenced, so if they win a few games and they end up picking 5th or 6th, and okay, you could still miss out on a quarterback doing that. But look at, and this is the example that gets used all the time, but it's a really good one, and it's something that people need to remember. In 2014, the Jets won a meaningless game against the Tennessee Titans in December, and because of that game, the Titans picked second. The Jets ended up picking sixth. And so the Jets wound up with Leonard Williams, who's a really, really strong defensive lineman, and looks like he's going to be an all-pro for years to come. And the Titans got Marcus Mariota, who is a franchise changer, right? Because now you look at the Titans, a lot of people think they're the strong odds-on favorite to win the division in Houston. In the Central, with Houston being the other team, depending on what happens with Deshaun Watson. And you're building around him, and he's a guy that if he stays healthy looks like could lead a resurgence and a team into some long-term contention. You could be seeing the Titans as a team that over the next 10 to 15 years is a real player in the AFC. And in order to do that, you have got to hit on a quarterback, and that's why as good as Leonard Williams is, look, Leonard Williams is a really strong piece to have on an otherwise good team, but on a bad team he gets lost, whereas a quarterback like Mariota all of a sudden gives you complete hope, right? And so that's kind of why, you alluded to, Ben, you don't want a middle ground. You either want to be a contender or you want to be a team that's bad enough to get that guy that's going to get you to contender status. Now, look, you get a quarterback, that alone is not going to solve it, right? You still got to put the pieces around him. And look, this is where that trade with Sheldon Richardson really helps out a lot, because now you have an extra second-round pick to play with. So you can either pick a guy there or you trade back and get even more picks, and you kind of do that, and you have $90 million to play with in the draft. But it all starts at that quarterback position. And right now, look, you saw with Josh McCown, and I don't – before I get into this, I'm going to mention Colin Kaepernick. So please – save your yelling and screaming on either side of the Kaepernick debate. I have nothing to add on that, and I really am not looking to get into some sort of crazy political thing about it. So please, I don't want to hear from anybody on Twitter about how to do it. But the reason why Kaepernick would have been a bad fit for the Jets is that McCown is the perfect quarterback for what they're looking to do. And here's what I mean, and you mentioned it, right? He didn't look scary bad, but he wasn't good. He was bad enough to not really get in the way of the tank, but he was good enough that the Jets aren't going to be on any, Hall of Shame highlight reels or anything like that, right? Like he was whatever. He was passable. And he's also a guy that's going to be under the radar. He'll say the right things to his teammates. He's not going to say anything in the media that's going to draw attention. And that's a big thing with the Jets right now. They are desperately trying to shed that image of this circus clown team that, oh, look at the Jets making the crazy moves again. And even last year when they were, Bowles is in town now, no more of this. And then you had Muhammad Wilkerson is showing up late, and Sheldon Richardson showing up late to meetings. And then Sheldon Richardson and Brandon Marshall are getting in a fight in the locker room. And Ryan Fitzpatrick is being a pain in the ass with the contract. And then after that, he's making snide comments to the coaching staff. So they really need to get away from that. And that's why Colin Kaepernick, even if you want to make the argument that he's better than Josh McCown, and look, even if he is, it's not by a lot. Like Colin Kaepernick is, at best, if you're being optimistic, a low-end starter. I would say he's probably more of a high-end backup. But the reason why he would have been a bad fit is because, look, what did he win? One game with the 49ers or two games with the 49ers last year with what might have been a better roster than this Jets team. So it's not like he makes any kind of real market difference. And what you're going to get, and I'm not saying this is Kaepernick's fault, so again, don't get on me. That's up to you to decide whether, you can decide what you think of what Kaepernick's doing. I have no real opinion on that. But like it or not, he was going to draw a lot of media attention because of what he does on Twitter and the stuff that he says in the media and so on and so forth. So the Jets are a team that just want to fly under the radar this year. They know they're bad. They just want to get it out of the way, no muss, no fuss, and move on. And so McCown serves that purpose, whereas Kaepernick may not have. You may have won an extra game or something with Kaepernick, maybe. But A, we've already determined that who cares about that because 2017 doesn't matter. And B, the price for that is that the Jets are going to be under the microscope all the time because of Kaepernick being on the team. And that's why I think he would have been a bad fit. But as far as McCown goes, he's the perfect guy for that. He's the tackling dummy. He's the guy that's just going to kind of stand in there. And eventually I think we'll see Bryce Petty. We'll probably see Hackenberg too, but I've now come to the conclusion that for as optimistic as I wanted to be, and you and I talked about this, Ben, I thought he was making strides as far as just the fundamentals, right? But he can't play. At least he if he's not even passable yet, I mean, what are the odds he's ever going to be anything? And Bryce Petty, and this is where you're going to laugh because, you know, Kyle will always give me a hard time about being an old man or whatever, but I remember watching Pat Ryan play, and Pat Ryan was the Jets' backup for 12 seasons, and people forget this, from 1978 to 1990. Anytime Kenny O'Brien or Richard Todd either got hurt or went through a cold spell, and if you go through the history of the team and you listen to my podcast, Play Like a Jet, which drops every Friday at turnonthejets.com, what you'll realize is that O'Brien and Richard Todd were both very streaky quarterbacks, and so Pat Ryan was that reliable, steady hand that when O'Brien was struggling, Joe Walton could say, all right, listen, take a seat, Kenny. Here, Pat, you go take care of this. Or Richard Todd is struggling. You know, you could have Walt Michaels, hey, Richard, take a seat. Pat's going to come in, whatever. There's value in having somebody like that, and the Jets haven't really had a steady long-term backup since Pat Ryan. And if Bryce Petty can find a way to be reasonably productive this year and prove that he could be potentially a guy that could be a long-term backup, there's value in that. I don't think that there's any chance that Bryce Petty's going to be, quote-unquote, the guy at quarterback, but maybe he gets to play and proves that he's halfway competent, and then he could be the backup to whoever that guy turns out to be next season, whether it's Jackson, Allen, Rosen, or Darnold. So that's really where I come down on it as far as why I think the Jets are so bad. There is no one on – there are very few people, I should say, on this team that I look at and go, you know, this guy is a definite building block. There are guys that could be building blocks and maybe a handful that are, but there's a lot of uncertainty, and the quarterback position is the big thing. But I think that you look at it kind of as each game is more or less a glorified preseason game, and that's kind of how I'm looking at it, because it's individual performances we're looking at from the young players, hoping for that, and the score of the game ultimately doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, no, I a lot to unpack what you just said, but I agreed with pretty much everything you said.
For running at the mouth there, Ben.
Not at all. No. I get to sit back and enjoy it. I mean, look, I get to put my feet up and drink some water. No, I enjoy it. The one thing I would add there, and just briefly on the Kaepernick thing, because I know you want to get into the whole thing, and I know everybody's, you know, talking about it, and so I'm sure our listeners are pretty sick about it. The one thing I'll say there, and whether you agree or disagree, and you know, personally, I have no issue with what he did, but I think the reason he's not in any team, and you know, I say this from my, you know, little blue bubble and my, you know, I'm not facing any sort of adversity, but I think the reason he's not on any team is because of the media. I honestly think you're spot on. I mean,
I think that's a big part of it. Yeah. If
he was not looked at as a distraction, and I don't even if you agree with him, he is still a distraction in the sense that. Mm-hmm. There are going to be articles written about him. There are going to be, you know, the cameras are going to be on him if he's your backup quarterback, if he's your starter. So even if you agree with him or you disagree with him, he's still going to draw attention to himself. And, you know, that's part of what he did. And, you know, again, I have no problem with what he did.
Sure.
But for the Jets, you know, case, if he wasn't bringing as much media attention, they might be interested in bringing him in, you know. But, I mean, he's also kind of, I think he's better than McCown, so I think he would kind of get in the way of the tank, whereas he could get him to 4 or 5 wins. I think he could get him to 4 or 5, 6 wins. And then you're like, okay,
do you really?
I thought last year he looked better than he had the year before that. According to, I read some crazy stats that he was better than most quarterbacks that played Sunday. His overall his overall rating from last year was higher than most quarterbacks. Well, I think I'll put it this way: I think he's better than Josh McCown, and I agree with what he did. But I think that the reason he's not in any team is because of the media. They've overdone it to the point where, I mean, look, the attention was needed because that was the aim of his protest, was to bring attention. But now it's to the point where he's in ESPN every single day, and so no team is going to want to bring that in, even as a backup quarterback. But I would put my money that he's better than probably 25 of the backup quarterbacks in this league, maybe more, and certainly some of the starters. So, I mean, he deserves a spot in this league, but when you have a guy almost has as much media attention as almost Tim Tebow, and obviously for different reasons, but it's kind of the same thing with Tebow, except Kaepernick is an actual NFL quarterback, but It's the same thing with Tebow, where it's like, okay, you bring him in, and all the media attention is going to be on you, which isn't something that is attractive to many teams, and especially to the New York Jets, who, as you said, are looked at as a circus, and they're so desperately trying to get away from that image. Even if a Kaepernick came and he played well, and well enough to get into 5 games, he's still going to, perpetuate that circus atmosphere. Even if he's playing well, it's just because, Colin Kaepernick, a back page in the New York Daily News, Colin Kaepernick says this. So again, politics aside, agree with him, disagree with him, he does bring attention to the team, and I think that's the reason he's not in. I would blame some media outlets for overdoing it. I would blame ESPN. I would blame all the other people that have just overstimulated the Colin Kaepernick story, and now it's the point where no NFL team wants to have all that attention on him. And I think he deserves a shot, and part of me thinks he might get it next season, or maybe, who knows, maybe somebody will sign him in the middle of the season. But it's really unfortunate, and the fact that there are a lot of different reasons floating around, but the one that I personally believe, and I think that makes the most sense, is just it's the media. I mean, it's all the attention, and so it is what it is.
No, I agree, and I'll just add a couple of quick thoughts, and then we'll move on, because again, I don't want this to turn into a referendum on Kaepernick. I'm not gonna, I don't have any real strong opinion one way or the other that hasn't been articulated already, and so many people get so emotional about this, and it becomes so personal, and people get so angry about it, and nobody can really seem to have a level-headed conversation about this whole thing with him. But the only thing I'll say is, number one, the reason why I was like, really, when you said you think you could get them to 5 or 6 wins, is that I don't know how many quarterbacks, period, could get this team to 5 or 6 wins, given how bad the roster is. I think maybe he's good for another win or two, maybe over McCown, but and I think you could, I think maybe he's better than McCown, whatever. I think the thing about it is, though, again, what did he win? 2 games with San Francisco last year, and San Francisco had arguably a stronger roster. So, and this is not necessarily to say anything positive or negative about Kaepernick. It's just that on this roster, I just don't know how much of a difference he really would make. And the other thing with him is that I think very few people that know football believe that everyone knows that he would be a backup somewhere if it wasn't for the fact that this whole thing was going on. Whether you agree with him or not, just based on his ability, if Ryan Fitzpatrick is a backup somewhere and guys like that, somebody would have taken a flyer on him. But, it comes to the point where if a guy is the 30th or 40th best somewhere in that range, the 30th to 40th best quarterback, and he's not really a needle mover, and he's not going to start most likely on most teams. And look, you could say stuff like, Cleveland or Houston, but Houston got Watson, and that's clearly their plan, and so it's only a matter of time. You've got Kaiser, who's starting right away in Cleveland, so they want to go that direction. That's really what that is that he's the 30th to 40th best quarterback in the league, and teams don't see him as a guy that's like a major difference maker, even if he's, a low-end starter, something along those lines. And so that really ultimately is what it comes down to, is you hit on it, man. It's the media. And, again, I'm not necessarily blaming Kaepernick. Whatever your thoughts are on what he's doing, teams, especially a team like the Jets that has this reputation where they're all, the media is always around calling them a joke, and I'm not saying Kaepernick would make them a joke. It's just that whether you like it or not, when you're involved in something like that, that's drawing a lot of media attention, and where anytime you tweet something, it goes viral, or anytime you say something, it's a national story, or anytime, whatever it is, especially in the biggest media market in the world, by the way, with a team that's trying so hard to escape this whole image of the team that is always on the back pages for reasons unrelated to football, that just doesn't become a good fit for the Jets. And he may be there were other teams, you make a case for the Ravens or whatever, and I'm not going to get into where he could have signed or whether or not he's a good fit wherever, because this is not a show about Colin Kaepernick, but we'll put this to bed by just saying that I think that that's why, for the Jets, he would have made no sense. And like you said, he also may have gotten in the way of a tank, because even if he gives you that extra 1 or 2 wins, if you want to say that, well, all right, now look at what I just said before about beating the Titans in that meaningless December game. And so that happens, and now instead of getting the quarterback you want, maybe you're out of position to get a quarterback, and you've got to now use all these draft assets that you needed to use to rebuild your team to go up and get a quarterback that you would have just had with the pick you had instead of using extra assets if you hadn't won that extra game or two. So I think that, you can make a case for him in various situations. I think for the Jets it would have been a bad fit for a variety of reasons. But that being said, Ben, I think that you hit the nail on the head as let's move from quarterback to running back here. At running back, I don't know what the Jets are doing, and I don't know if they're going to make adjustments this week, but all due respect to Matt Forte, who's had a borderline Hall of Fame career, and he's been an excellent running back for the better part of a decade, really. He's done. He's got nothing left. There's no way he's playing beyond this year. I can't see anybody signing him. And so why not use Bilal Powell if nothing else? People have floated this idea. Joe Caparoso has, and other people have. Why not showcase Bilal Powell? Because think about it this way. He's 29. He doesn't really have a place on a rebuilding team, but if he plays well, which he always does when they give him the opportunity, that's a guy that a contending team may look at around the trade deadline and say, maybe it's worth a 4th-round pick to get this guy and bring him in here as an extra weapon down the stretch run, right? And you give Elijah McGuire some carries and see what he can do for you, because now it's easier to evaluate what you need to do in the draft and spending in free agency in 2018 if you know what McGuire can do for you. So to me, Forte is a guy that really should, like you said, IR is probably the best option, or just, look, there have been people talking over and over again, the Jets could trade Forte to this team, or, the Dallas because of Zeke, or to Arizona because of David Johnson. But the fact is, what can you get at this point out of Matt Forte that you can't get out of some kid on somebody's practice squad, right? He's showing you nothing. He looks completely done. So I think the pipe dream of getting even a conditional draft pick for Matt Forte should probably just go in the wastebasket at this point. And we should realize that, honestly, he should probably either be cut, given only garbage time carries, put on IR, deactivated, whatever you want to do with him, but he really shouldn't be seeing very many carries. And you should be showcasing Powell for a possible trade and seeing what Elijah McGuire's got, so you know if he's a guy that you can build around, or at least be a building block for the long haul.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you there. I think, Forte is done. I mean, if you can get any sort of, 7th-round pick or something, but I don't even think after watching that Week 1 game, unless he plays, look, maybe they're trying to do the Bilal Powell strategy, as you said. Hey, play him. Maybe he has a 100-yard game, and then you're able to trade him or something like that. Try to showcase him. But, he's not doing himself any favors, especially after that game, unless he plays well against the Raiders or another team down the line. I don't think the Jets are going to be able to get anything for him, so I guess keep him as a depth guy, keep him as a mentor. I definitely hope to see a lot more Elijah McGuire. I was excited to watch him. We didn't get to see him at all. And I think, honestly, he might be the best running back. I love Bilal, but as far as what he's going to bring, just explosiveness, I think youth. I think he's the best running back for this team right now. I love Bilal, and I think he should be the starter. But I think Elijah McGuire should be getting a lot of carries. We've had a caller on the line for a while, so we're going to get to him. We're going to talk about this game. We're going to talk about the game this Sunday. When we're done, Then we'll come back to the positional breakdowns. We'll talk a little bit. I know we touched on the quarterbacks a bit, but we're going to just give our draft big board. Kyle and I were looking at doing this throughout the season of just ranking the top 4 quarterbacks and then giving we won't do it this week just because Kyle isn't here and I haven't had time to coordinate with him. But the plan is to do a weekly, draft big board. You have the big 4, you rank them how they do. How are they doing, right now with the overall, and then you have your 5th guy who based off how they played that weekend. But for this one with you, I think we're just going to rank the 4. So we'll do positional breakdowns, rank the 4, and then we'll do this caller right now. We'll talk about Bowles with the caller and unpack this whole game. So without further ado, Daniel, haven't called in a while. Daniel, how you doing, man? Daniel, can you hear me? Daniel, you there, man?
I think Daniel just went to Todd Bowles' office and told him not to punt.
No, hello?
Hey, Daniel, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, sweet. Nice. And we had a little connection issue there to start, but how are you doing, man?
Pretty good. Yeah, enjoying the show. Didn't quite catch, y'all got a topic at hand, or you just talking about the game in general?
Hey, we're just spitballing here. I guess Daniel, we'll open up with, we'll talk about this Jets-Bills game. Probably the one thing we haven't talked about, which is the most frustrating thing from Sunday, is Coach Bowles. His decision to punt down 2 scores late in the 4th. Just what is your instant reaction to that? What are your thoughts on that? I'm going to guess it's not too positive, but just give your take.
Yeah, no, I had kind of tuned out by that time. So the strategy, whatever his motivation for the decisions that he makes, is kind of just escapes me, because I know what this season is and I know what it's about, and I know everybody's looking at him like, he should make better decisions, but he's no different than the players. He was a player himself. He is what he is. He's not a chance taker. He's never been somebody who takes chances. He coaches out of a guidebook. That's what the guidebook says is the
Joe Girardi school of coaching.
Yeah, exactly. But see, maybe Joe Girardi has a lot more talent. Brian Cashman's a way better GM than Mike Mackinnon or the guy before him. But,
it'd be nice if the Jets would hire Cashman. Yeah.
we could do a lot worse. But so we know what it is with Todd Bowles. I had tuned out by that time. How many scores were we down? Was it more than 10? It was more than 1 score, right?
I think it was. What was it? Scott, was it 12, 11? I'm trying to remember the exact score. It would have been that would have been 9 or
9 points,
excuse me, 11. Yeah, 11 points, I think. No, 9 points. 9 points. My bad.
It was 9 at that time. Yeah, look, Todd Bowles not gonna do nothing to surprise me. That's pretty much what I expect. But what I did like, and this speaks to how starved we are for anything even competent under center, is as much as Josh McCown isn't the answer. If you forget about the 4th quarter when he threw those picks, which is him trying to make something happen and possibly get a win, he actually looked competent. And it's been so forever since we've ever seen anybody competent under center. He seems like he made smart decisions.
He got that touchdown.
He got a touchdown.
Yeah, I was worried that Bowles was going to kick the field goal when it was 4th and inches at the 1-yard line. But thankfully he ran the QB sneak. That thought popped into my head. I was like, oh, is he going to kick the field? And then I was like, okay, good. They at least ran a play. But no, I actually agree with you. I think Josh McCown, until he had to throw those, as I said to Scott earlier, until he really had to push the ball down the field, he looked pretty good. With the intermediate short passing game, he was feeding the ball to Kearse, to Ty. He was getting the ball to the tight ends. Exactly what the Jets really need. But again, when he needed to win the game, when the game was on his shoulders, he's just not going to be there. He threw.
Yeah, no. I don't think anybody expects him to turn into that. That's probably been his downfall throughout his career. That's probably why he's in the position he's in now, is that he just can't really turn it up.
Daniel, I'll tell you, I said this before, and this is basically Josh McCown in one sentence. He's good enough to not be embarrassing and bad enough to not get in the way of losing a game. That's basically what he is. He's a guy that's not, you're not going to laugh at him, but he's not going to do anything that's going to win you a game. And that he did that again. I mean, you mentioned, Ben, the short and intermediate passing game. That's fine, but they barely moved the chains. I mean, how many first downs did they even have?
I remember after they showed that graphic, I think it was during the first quarter, the Jets had like 1 first down compared to like Buffalo's 11 or something, which was just depressing to look at. I mean, he had a good, I think it was third quarter or second quarter or whatever. He got us a few scoring drives. So I see what Daniel's coming from. But yeah, the first quarter and the fourth quarter, I mean, were definitely rough moments for Josh. Now, Daniel, moving on, I want to talk a bit about Darren Lee, who definitely didn't perform as well as people wanted him to. I've been saying on this show that the Jets should switch to 4-3, partly because, not entirely, but because you could put Darren Lee at that 4-3 right outside linebacker position, which would be perfect for him. And I think we had a little bit more evidence of that in this game is Darren Lee, if you ignore all his pass coverage, if Darren Lee wasn't supposed to cover, which, again, I will remind everybody, was what the Jets drafted him for, is that he was going to be able to be a hybrid, fast coverage linebacker. But ignoring that, he was actually pretty good against the run game, and I think he got a half sack or something. So if he's just rushing the quarterback, stopping the run, he's actually a pretty solid guy. I mean, he's not a difference maker, at least now, but he's always around the ball, at least in the run game. It's when he has to when quarterbacks are throwing up against him, I mean, he just looks as lost as he did his rookie year. I mean, he was getting beat by crossing routes and touchdowns, and it's just, can't guard running backs or tight ends or anything. But Daniel, your thoughts on Darren Lee? Do you think it's time to start throwing the bust word around? Is that too early to throw around? I don't generally like to, but as far as, hey, this is a guy the Jets drafted to be their starting middle linebacker to replace David Harris, to be the fast hybrid coverage linebacker, and he really hasn't done any of that besides he's fast and he can kind of get, in the box and stuff. He reminds me of, almost like Calvin Pryor, where it's to the point where it's like, you put him in the box and you put him where he's just, rushing the passer or getting up to the run. He's not terrible. He's always around the ball, but when it's just when you have to see him in coverage, and he's terrible. I mean, and it fits the skill set, but he's just terrible. He just, for some reason, I mean, he just, I don't even know how to, he just seems lost, and that's something you expect in a rookie. But a guy going into his second year, I don't know. But Daniel, your thoughts on Darren Lee? Do you think it's too early to start throwing the word bust around?
No, I don't think he's a bust. I mean, he's shown that he can play, but he has limitations. I mean, if we're looking for him to be another David Harris, I don't see it. If David Harris had Darren Lee's physical talent, he'd probably still be on the team, and that's just to say the least. For Darren Lee to really turn into somebody worth that pick, you're probably right. You're gonna have to stick him on the outside. I personally would be worried about his durability because he's little.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It surprised me that he made it through all of last season without getting hurt. He did get hurt.
He got that ankle injury in the middle of the season, but
stuff like that. He came to Ohio State. He was a safety.
Right.
So they beefed him up or whatever. So now he's supposed to be a linebacker. He's a little guy. So that's what worries me about him. No, I don't think he's a bust, but I wouldn't expect, he probably shouldn't have been drafted in the first round, but his measurables would have made it so if we'd have waited to the second round to get him, he probably would have been gone. But he's probably not really a first-round player. Not for what you expect from him. I mean, what are your expectations? A Pro Bowl linebacker or something?
Well, when you pick a guy that high, that's what your expectations are, right?
With that aside, ignoring where he was drafted, what are your expectations of him?
Now? I mean, I just would like him to become a competent starter. I think the biggest problem with him is, and Ben, you talked about it, it's kind of funny the way you phrase it. If all he had to do was be in the life, if he didn't have to cover, if he didn't have to do this, if he didn't have to do that, all right, if I didn't have to pay rent, I would have a ton of money in the bank. You know what I mean? It's just kind of, if he didn't have to do all the jobs that a linebacker is expected to do, I think the problem with him is not only can he not cover, but he hasn't really shown strong instincts either, and that's a big problem. And to be honest, the funny thing about it is he was picked to be everything that Rex Ryan picked Demario Davis to be. He was supposed to be the guy that was going to shut down Gronk or Jimmy Graham, and he was going to be able to cover guys like LaShawn McCoy in the flat and stuff like that. And obviously Demario Davis was terrible at that, and he continues to be terrible. The only positive I can say about Demario Davis at this point is at least he's got a positive attitude as opposed to Calvin Pryor, who he was traded for, who is now back with his old friend John Idzik in Jacksonville. But that was what the expectation was when they took Darren Lee, and he doesn't look like there's any chance that he's going to turn into that player at this point. And I think that he's got to – if he could become a reasonably decent starter, I'd be happy at this point, but I don't even know if that's going to happen.
He's a fast version of Demario Davis. He's Demario Davis with speed.
Well, Davis has speed. He's just not like blazing speed, but yeah, he's a faster version of Davis, but that's not really a compliment, right?
No. I don't mean it to be a compliment. So it just goes to my point. I mean, I don't have high expectations for him, and I don't think anybody else should. Not at this point. Maybe because he has the physical tools, he can grow into the role. But I've been watching this team long enough, and just football in general. When guys don't have it, they don't have it. Mm-hmm. Like you keep expecting them for the light to switch on. It doesn't happen unless you're talking about like quarterbacks, you know what I'm saying, when they hit 30 or 32, 33 years old or something like that. But like Darren, somebody like Darren Lee, if he's not showing it, he's not going to show it.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. I mean, look, Scott, as I said, my whole point is saying if he didn't have to cover, I think he could be good as it. It's just an argument to push him outside. To push him as an outside linebacker because
look, Ben, I'm just busting your chops, man. Kyle's not here, so somebody's got to mess with you.
No, I actually liked what you said, and Daniel, I agree with you. If he's not showing it, he's not going to show it. But my personal thing is if he's not showing it, he's not going to show it at middle linebacker. But look, if he was to push outside, I think he might show more. But then it's like, well, where are you playing? Because right now the Jets are still playing that 3-4. They sometimes play 4-3, so they have a bit of a hybrid defense going. And Josh Martin and Jordan Jenkins have looked good. All right, well, we'll switch to a bit more of a positive here. Daniel, I'll start with you. Another player that we want to talk about, Jermaine Kearse. I think it's he's been with the team for a week and a half, and he was the leader in receptions. He was clearly Josh McCown's favorite target. He had 7 catches, 59 yards. What were your thoughts on Jermaine Kearse? It looks like the Jets. Look, you don't want to say this after 1 week, but it looks like the Jets probably won this trade, getting a second-round draft pick. And yes, you do have to remember it is Seattle, and they're probably going to be good, so it's more like an early third-round draft pick. But Jermaine Kearse, looking like a solid wide receiver, was definitely the best receiver for the Jets on the field. So Daniel, your thoughts on Kearse? Yeah,
I'm happy that we got him. I think he's a player. He impressed me. Do you guys and y'all been watching the team for a while? Do you remember when Chester McLaughlin played for the Jets?
I sure do.
Do you remember like when he first came to the team? I was watching the game and I can't remember who we were playing. And of the guys on the defense, he was the one that was hustling the hardest. He was the one that was making all the plays. And we had just brought him in and was such an indictment of that team's scout staff and their drafting and their ability to put a team together. And this is the same thing with Kearse. Like, he just got here. I don't know if he had a full week of practice. And he's the one that's playing, like, the best on the team, regardless of, like, all the other guys who have been here for, like, a couple of years at least.
And the funny thing about that was Chester McLaughlin at that point wasn't even that good of a player anymore. In his time, exactly. He was more or less at the very end of his run. And the funny thing about it is, though, and I feel bad because I think, Ben, you weren't even a fetus yet at the point that we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm just going to defer this question over to Scott. He's definitely the past Jets team expert. So you can field this question.
But yeah, Chester McLaughlin, for anybody that doesn't remember him, at one point was one of the best defensive tackles in the league with the Raiders. By the time he got to the Jets, he was pretty much finished with, Art Monk and guys like that also, at the very end of their career would come to the Jets. But you're right. I mean, that was something that with Curse, you're like, wait a second. This guy, and not that he was great, by the way. He only had a couple of yards per catch, so it wasn't like he had dazzling numbers. But you're like, all right, this guy looks like a presentable, actual professional offensive player, whereas the rest of these guys kind of didn't. And like you said, McLaughlin, you're like, this guy's pretty much finished. Why is he the one that's looking the best out there? And Curse, it's the same thing. Not that he's finished, but he's an okay receiver. Why is he the guy that's the only one that looks like a professional offensive player out there?
He should have been the guy that got like 2 catches for 7 yards, and it's like, okay, well, he just got here, and
exactly,
expect him to turn it up like maybe in week 3 or week 4, but he comes off the bus, from Seattle, totally different offense. I mean, maybe it's some similarities, but it's still like a totally different quarterback, staff, everything. He probably isn't even settled into his apartment, and he puts up 7 catches. I think that's such an indictment of the rest of the team.
It is. I mean, that was the one thing. Every time you'd make a catch, I mean, I wanted to be happy, but then I'm just thinking, like, okay, this means that the Jets wide receivers are pretty terrible. If this guy, who's literally been on the roster for 5 days, is by head and shoulders above everybody on this roster, I mean, it's just, oh boy, we're in for sure. I mean, it's like, really? This guy who was a mediocre receiver at best. I mean, no, don't get me wrong. He made some great plays, but I mean, this is a guy coming across the country. It was probably the 3rd or 4th best receiver in Seattle. Comes to the Jets. Doesn't, as you said, probably doesn't even have an apartment. He's been in the playbook for maybe a few days, and he's just head and shoulders the best guy on the field for the Jets. And not even just the receivers. He was the best guy on the offensive side of the ball for the New York Jets, which is just comical. I want to laugh, but it's like the Jets are that far away. I mean, you want to be happy. It's like, okay, I guess we got one. But then you have to think about, what about the other 10 guys? They're all not good. I mean, unless Stewart or Hansen or McGuire develops. I mean, it's like, or when we get ASJ back. But he was no joke the best offensive player on the Jets. I mean, I almost forgot that we're watching Jermaine Kearse here. It's not like we're watching Larry Fitzgerald. I mean, this isn't like, but he was by far and away the only guy who could actually do anything. I mean, even Robbie Anderson, who has so much, high expectations. I was looking forward to the one question I posed to Kyle, and Kyle shot it down pretty quickly, was, can Robbie Anderson run a slant route? Can Robbie Anderson go over the middle? Can Robbie Anderson run an out? So much of what we've seen from Robbie is a lot of deep routes. Yeah, he's got that one route, he's got the go route, and then he can hit the comeback if the corner plays back. Then he occasionally get a curl or a comeback route that works for him. But the only route really Robbie can run to this point in his career is the go route, and we don't have a quarterback that can get at that. So it's like Jermaine Kearse is literally the only solid receiving option for the Jets. I mean, teams are going to have, if teams double team Jermaine Kearse, the Jets will have nobody, which is
my God, dude.
You're going to double team Jermaine Kearse.
Any team would double team Jermaine Kearse.
But what
does that tell you about this offense?
Exactly. If you double team Jermaine Kearse, the Jets are. Think about it. If the Jets didn't have Jermaine Kearse that game, what are they doing? Because Kearse, I know he didn't have a monster game, but I think he had a huge 3rd down catch. I think it was like 3rd and 15. He got like an 18-yard catch or something. He was making some catches in traffic and stuff. It wasn't an amazing game. It was a pretty average game, a pretty good game for a guy who just got here, as we said. But like, you take him away from that offense, the Jets look even worse than they did. I don't even think they get a touchdown on that drive. I mean, he saved that drive, so it's like it's hard to even think about. Well, Daniel, I guess we'll keep going. I'm enjoying this call. I think we're all just laughing at how terrible the Jets are. I guess we'll talk a bit about the safeties to cheer us up. Jamal Adams had a terrific game. Marcus May had a good game, and he had some great moments. He's definitely a good tackler, which is something that I was worried a bit about with Jamal Adams in the preseason. I saw Jamal make a few shoestring tackles that didn't go his way. Marcus May, is a very good tackler, a very sound tackler. He got lost in coverage a few times, and on the flip side, he made a few good plays. But I guess I'll start with Scott this time. And Scott, I know we did touch on them a brief bit at the beginning, but I just want to get your in-depth take on Marcus May and Jamal Adams' performance. I mean, what are you expecting for them from them this weekend? And what did you see from them Sunday against Buffalo?
Well, they're going to be tested, obviously, because now you're stepping up to a much better receiving core. You've got Amari Cooper, right, and you've got Michael Crabtree, and that's a tough task for young players to deal with. What I will say is, and here's where the cheap plug comes in, for anybody that hasn't heard the beginnings of this series that I'm doing on my podcast, Play Like a Jet, on the 1988 season, Eric McMillan's been joining us, and we've already had him on for 2 weeks. He's going to be on again for week 3 this week. And by the way, he is going to tell a story that you will not believe about one of the greatest quarterbacks who ever played. Trust me, you want to check it out. This story was so insane. I actually had to stop at one point and say, wait a minute, are you playing with me? Is this a prank? It's a crazy story. But back in 88, the reason I reference it, in addition to giving myself a cheap plug there, is that Eric McMillan and James Hasty were 2 guys that were picked in the 3rd round and were expected to contribute right away, and they were starters day one. But there were struggles. So if you go back to week 1, both McMillan and Hasty, and Eric talked about this on the program, they were talking about how when they were going up against Stanley Morgan, the receiver from the Patriots at the time, and he was confusing them. They were doing one of those deals where they were going to bracket coverage him. So if he got to the outside, Hasty would have him. If he went off to the left, then McMillan would grab him. But what he would do is stop and start and cut up the middle, and then it was almost like Bad News Bears, so they'd be like running into each other, and Morgan would run open and get the ball. And so you're going to have to expect growing pains like that early on. Now, the good news is you didn't see a lot of that from Jamal Adams. He actually was one of the bright spots. He played very well, great closing speed, seemed to have some excellent instincts, and kind of recognized what was going on in the field. Obviously, Marcus May, we know what the deal is. There were some plays there where he really just kind of got lost a little bit, but that's going to happen sometimes when you have 2 rookies, no matter how highly regarded they are or how good they may be in the long run. As you'll see as we go through our 1988 series with Eric, there were some major growing pains throughout the season. For as good as Eric McMillan and James Hasty were that year and would become for years to come, Eric McMillan, the first and only Jet to be a Pro Bowler in his first 2 seasons with the team, and actually led the AFC in interceptions his rookie year. And James Hasty is a guy that doesn't get talked about enough, but he's one of the best defensive backs that the team's ever had. He was an excellent number 1 corner for several years with the team. And you hope that Marcus May and Jamal Adams can have that kind of impact in the secondary for years to come. Another guy that was on the podcast to talk about 2008, Kerry Rhodes, he's another one that was picked and started right away, and he turned into an all-pro. So you got to understand that there are going to be growing pains. And the funny thing about it is, Ben, Marcus May was the one that everybody was talking about as, oh, look at how great he is in camp and look at how great he is in the preseason. And he's the one that kind of struggled on Sunday, whereas Adams seemed, like he picked it up right away and he was advanced beyond his years right off the bat. But I think we've seen enough potential from them to think that they could be the starting safety tandem for a long time to come. But with that comes the realization that they are rookies, and there are going to be times where you're going to be a little frustrated with them. Now, the good news is, as we've said, the win-loss record doesn't really matter this season. It's all about the progress. So if there are growing pains and they lose some games, whatever, as long as when the year ends, we look back and say, May and Adams, these 2 guys are going to be cornerstones of that defense for many years to come with Leonard Williams. And I think that's probably where we're headed. But it was very good to see Jamal Adams get off to such a strong start. And May had his moments of struggling, but I think he'll bounce back. Now, the Raiders, obviously, we're going to get into that specifically. It's going to be a tough task because the Raiders obviously have one of the best quarterbacks in the league. They've got Michael Crabtree, who's really started to kind of fulfill his potential. He played very well with the Raiders last year. And Amari Cooper, who's one of the better receivers in the league. So there are a lot of weapons. Marshawn Lynch can do some things, and obviously the safety is going to have to come up and try and help and stop him. It's going to be a big challenge on the road, but I think that even if they miss a few plays here and there, you're going to have to be forgiving of that. It's growing pains. And look, you go on the road and play one of the best teams in the league with one of the top quarterbacks and one of the best passing attacks. And there's going to be, I guarantee you, there's going to be some plays where we see May or Adams or both of them, and there's going to be some sort of issue. But this will be a good test for them, and it'll be a good way to kind of help prepare them for the long run of the season and help get them better. And that's really all we want from them, I think. And so I think while you may see some struggles, if they can hold their own or at least come close to it, that'll be a very strong sign of things to come.
No, yeah, exactly. Daniel, your take on the safety duo, and then we're going to move on and let you go. We'll do one more topic after this and let you go, because you spat some absolute fire tonight, but we have another call on the line. So this, and then we'll ask you one more question, then we're going to have to let you go. But a huge thank you for calling in, man. You've been awesome. But your thoughts on the two rookie safeties?
Yeah, I think the other gentleman, I'm sorry, what's your name again?
Scott,
yeah, he touched on all of it. I mean, the one bright spot, not only on the defense but on the team. One thing I noticed out of both of them, like you said, May struggled a little bit, and I think that the team's goal is to kind of have May be the free while Jamal locks down the strong. But they've showed the versatility to be able to switch them up. And when you saw May struggle, they switched Jamal back out to the free safety spot, and like right away he made plays in his area. And talent, you know, it's good and it's inspiring to be able to see some talent on a team that's actually like playing up to their talent. And you just hope that continues, you know, for the next couple of seasons, that they develop throughout this season and keep it going. Unlike what we're seeing from some of the D linemen, one in particular. I mean, I tried to give Mo the benefit of the doubt, but I don't know what happened. What happened to this guy? You know, but that's another topic. Yeah, I love the safety combo. Love it. We haven't had a talented free safety on this team, I think, maybe since '88. I mean, has it been that long?
No. Come on, let's not forget Kerry Rhodes here. Let's not forget Kerry Rhodes.
Hey! Jim Leonard, guys. Jim Leonard was
stay healthy.
Like 2 years.
He couldn't stay healthy. When we needed him the most, he had broke legs.
No, the last guy on this team to be a high-level free safety was Kerry Rhodes. He was an All-Pro in 2006 and a really good player for a handful of years with the Jets. Before that, it would have been Eric McMillan. Victor Green, an excellent strong safety, but really that free safety spot, it's been the funny thing about it is they ran Kerry out of town because Rex had this whole thing about how he wasn't his type of player or whatever he perceived, that that whole thing in the media with, Kerry only cares about Hollywood, which is nonsense. Kerry goes on, he gets traded to Arizona. He goes on to play well there. And the Jets have been looking to replace him ever since, and finally had to use the 6th pick in the draft on trying to lock down that spot. So it's kind of ironic there. But, it's been a position where for a long time the Jets haven't had a guy there that you could really count on. So, like you said, I really hope that this can be the combination that we can, maybe Ben and I are talking when he's off at college and we're saying, hey, remember when we were talking about May and Adams and how they were first getting started? Well, boy, they're both in the Pro Bowl now. How great is that, right?
Yeah. Were you guys happy with Calvin Pryor, or was there somebody else that you guys wanted? Just throwing this out there because I know who I wanted.
When he was drafted?
Yeah.
I wanted Brandon Cooks, but I think that was probably just because I live in Oregon and I'd seen Brandon Cooks play a few times because my friend has season tickets. So given that I got to watch him and I just knew how dangerous he was, and I had a Brandon Cooks Oregon State jersey, I was like, you know what, give me Brandon Cooks, put him out wide. And I don't like to toot my own horn, but it seems like I would have been right because he's
you would have been
awesome.
right.
Yeah, he was an awesome wide receiver, definitely better than what Calvin Pryor turned out to be. Scott, did you have a guy, and then we'll hear Daniel's guy?
Yeah, I'm with you. That's who I wanted too. I wanted Brandon Cooks, and actually, and I'll admit this, but I thought Cooks would be a better receiver than Odell Beckham. So it doesn't matter because the Giants picked Beckham before the Jets went anyway. But, yeah, I did want Cooks. I kind of talked myself into Pryor after they drafted him because I said, look, here's a guy that's a physical, nasty safety, and he'll bring. But realistically, especially the way that this team plays, his skill set didn't really fit. When Bowles came, they were trying to talk us into the fact that he was going to play that Deion Buchanan role. That's what Bowles did with Deion Buchanan, where he was kind of that hybrid safety linebacker. It didn't work out, but yeah, I'm with you, Ben. That's who I wanted. I wanted Brandon Cooks at the time, and obviously, I'm like a broken clock. I'm right twice a day. I guess one of those times was then because Cooks obviously would have been a much better pick than Calvin Pryor turned out to be.
Yeah, I'm normally right, but I agree with you. I'm normally wrong on some of these things, Scott. But I don't mean again to be immodest, but I had, because I think it was 2013, 2014, something like that. So I used to have a Jets Instagram or whatever it was before I started the podcast. It was just a way I could post whatever. And in my mock draft, I had the Jets taking Odell Beckham Jr. and I was just like, this guy's gonna be the best receiver in this class, number one wide receiver. So I was right about him and Cooks, I guess. But, I don't think it would have been that hard to be right because I'm pretty sure every single wide receiver in that draft, in the first round, I'm pretty sure, was a beast. I mean, you had Mike Evans, you had Odell Beckham Jr., you had Brandon Cooks. I'm pretty sure Martavis Bryant went later. So that draft was a really easy wide receiver draft. But anyways, Daniel, who was the guy that you were eyeing that 2014 draft? Oh, my.
Glenn Dix.
Yeah, that was the thing that always confused me is why, if the Jets were going to go safety, did they go the strong safety? Because they already had DeJuan Landry who couldn't play free safety. So then you were just stuck with two strong safeties. It just always pissed me off that it was like, wait, there's this great free safety, Clinton Dix. And then it's like, it's whatever. But they
took the who was the corner that couldn't stay healthy?
D. Milner.
Yeah, they took Milner out of Alabama, and okay, you get him, and you get his. Why wouldn't you just get his partner? And you need a free safety. He's right there.
That's part of the reason that got fired right there.
That's the same deep breath sentiment that we always come with every game losing interception or fumble or touchdown or missed field goal. It's always just that same sigh. Yeah. But Daniel, lastly, this Sunday game against the Raiders. What are your predictions for this game? How much are the Jets going to lose by? Anything else you're expecting as far as players to pop out or whatnot? Just your overall expectations for this Sunday. Yeah, the Raiders are humming. So I predict we're probably going to lose probably by at least 3 touchdowns. My only hope for the Jets is that they just don't totally embarrass themselves. Play hard, play fast, play smart, lose by 1 point.
Yeah, that's the thing. If we're gonna, I actually agree with Daniel there. It's like if the Jets are gonna tank, if we're gonna lose, and we're gonna try to get this number 1 draft pick, I want it to at least be interesting. At least let us lose in the final minutes against these good teams. I'd rather watch the Jets get their heart broken, with 1 minute to go than to lose by 28 points. At least if you're playing close with teams like the Raiders and you're just losing, and you go on to get the number 1 overall pick. Maybe some of those picks can put you over the hump. But, Daniel, fantastic call, man. Really quickly, give out your Twitter so our listeners can give you a follow because you were absolutely awesome. Am I mistaken? Have you called into the show before, or is this your first time?
This is my first time here, but I've called into what's the show that comes on Tuesdays? That's where I'm familiar with you from.
It's the show that should not be named, but let's talk Jets. But no, fantastic show over there. But really quickly, give out your Twitter so our listeners can give you a follow.
Yes, it's -OH1, the number. So -01.
All right, we will make sure to tweet that out. Thank you, Daniel. Again.
Ben, let me just interject. Is Daniel still there? Or is he gone?
Yep, no, I'm here.
Hey, sir.
Daniel, just wanted to throw this out to you too, since you brought up Chester McLaughlin, so obviously you've been following the Jets for a while. If you haven't given it a listen, you can check out my podcast too, Play Like a Jet. We go back in time, and each week we do some of the biggest moments in Jets history. We've been doing different seasons with actual guys that were on the team. We did 1997, the year Bill Parcells came into town with Adrian Morrell, who was the feature back at the time. Kerry Rhodes joined us to talk about 2008, the year Brett Favre came into town. We've had Rob Carpenter on to talk about 1992, which was the year that everybody thought that Browning Nagel was going to be the next great quarterback for the Jets, and it didn't quite work out that way. And right now, as I mentioned before, we're in the middle of talking about 1988, the last time that the Jets had two guys in the secondary that everybody expected to step up and be starters right away, Eric McMillan and James Hasty. So we're talking with Eric, and Eric is, let's just say, he's a colorful personality. He holds absolutely nothing back. So I just want to throw that out there because I want to make sure that you listen to the Jet Take every Wednesday at 8 o'clock. But if you're a Jets fan and have been a Jets fan for a long time, I thought you might enjoy that as well. So you can check that out at turnonthejets.com and Play Like a Jet at iTunes.
Looking forward to it.
Shameless plug there by Scott. But, I mean, he's not wrong. He does run a good show. But Daniel, thank you so much, man.
Thanks, Daniel.
Really looking forward to hearing your calls in the future.
All right, Ben. Take it easy.
Hey, you too. That was Daniel again. We'll make sure I'm writing a tweet right now. We're going to keep moving with the callers. Then when we're done, we have Sean on the line from Australia. Then we're going to go.
Is that Sean Walsh?
Yeah, we're bringing him on in a second. We have a wide ranging of callers and listeners. But after Sean, Scott will do a little breakdown of the positions, and then we'll probably do the draft, and then I guess our final predictions for Oakland. But before that, let's go ahead and get to Sean Walsh, one of my favorite callers. When he has time to call in, when he can make time during his busy schedule and his time difference. But Sean, thank you so much for calling in, man. How you doing?
Well, I wish I could say I was Sean Walsh, and
what?
What? From Australia, but
why is this CJ?
You'll have to settle for CJ from the.
What? No, wait, CJ. What did you call in from? Did you call from a laptop?
From my home.
Why does it say Sean Walsh? All right, that I'm not trying to pass the buck here, but I think Kyle might have put you in as Sean Walsh. I don't know what happened there, CJ. Hey, but it doesn't matter. I was also wondering, I was like, why is he calling in? It's like it's gonna be like 3 in the morning there. But CJ, I'm very happy to hear your voice because I know you live in the Florida area. Glad to hear you're okay. But I'm also happy because I know after a frustrating, horrible Jets loss, that it is always great to hear your fantastic, fiery rants. So, CJ, I guess I'll just give you the open mic to start. Your thoughts on the Jets-Bills game, just your instant reaction to both of the game, all the nonsense. Fire away. Scott, I recommend you get your popcorn ready and sit back.
You got it.
Well, basically put it like this. It's week 1 of the NFL season, and for all of the overreaction that we're listening to as far as you've got the far left, okay? We got the far left tank crowd. Okay, the tank crowd is just going to start bitching no matter what because we all want the first overall pick. But you know what? Let's just bitch along the way because we just got nothing else better to do with our lives. So let's just bitch. Bold sucks. McCagnon sucks. Let's just fire everybody. But the problem is that you people have to realize that once you fire these magoos that are here, you have to find somebody to come in here. And let's face it, the New York Jets is not exactly a very attractive job because of the fact that they've sucked for the past couple of years. All right? And if I really want to start going back into history, yeah, I've been through the agita, through the 70s, through the 80s, through the 90s. I lived through the Coslet years. I lived through the Joe Walton years when I wanted to hang myself. I watched Ken O'Brien get drafted ahead of Dan Marino. Let me just keep on bitching, okay? Because, hey, why not? We're Jet fans. This is what we do, okay? I've got one word for the entire fan base, and you all need to take my advice on this. RELAX. Relax. It's week 1. We said this in the offseason. We said this during the preseason that this entire season is going to be nothing but an extension of the preseason. We have 20 preseason games. The only difference is that the first 4, we had a roster of 90 players. Now we have a roster of 53. So let's just bitch about all 53. Why not? Let's bitch about the Cowboys and the Waterboys too. Can we stop it with the nonsense, please? We knew that this season was going to be a train wreck from the start. But you know what? We all wanted the youth movement. We all wanted to get younger. We wanted to rebuild. We wanted to strip everything down. Guess what, people? This is what rebuilding is 101. Live, in person, uncut, with all of its ugliness and warts and splinters and all the other bullshit that comes with it. Okay? Personally, this is 3 years overdue. Now, Here's for the other part of my bitching rant, which I know Ben is probably like turning all kinds of shades of red and laughing, and Kyle's probably falling over in his office chair somewhere, wherever he is in the deep, dark bunker of the unknown where he's hiding. Okay? So, essentially, look, this is what needed to happen, okay? But the problem is that we can't considerably sit here and look at the New England Patriots and look at the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens and the Seattle Seahawks and everybody else around the league, and we all want to say we want to be like them, we want to be like them, we want to be like them. Here's the problem. We can never be like them because we can never turn the reins over fully to one GM and one coach and give them a good 5 to 7 years to root the damn system that's in there to make this team successful. That's it. Everybody could play Monday morning quarterback all they want, but you want to know something? This team has not been successful since Bill Parcells. Then Bill Parcells, we had a little bit of flirtation with it with Herman Edwards, and then they ran his ass out of town. Then we had a little taste of it with Eric Mangini, and as soon as we traded for Brett Favre and we showed Chad Pennington the door, then everybody was, oh, what are we going to do now? Run Mangini out of town. Yeah, so we could open the door for the next schmuck to come in here and screw up for the next 3 years, and then we can get rid of him, and then get rid of the next GM, and then get rid of the next GM. Look, the reset button is broken, okay? I all want to take you back to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Do you all realize how long it took Bill Cowher to win a Super Bowl ring? And he's only got one. One! Bill Cowher was a coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers for what, 12 years? 13 years? Okay? Do you think each and every one of those 12, 13 years that he was an above 500 coach? No, he wasn't. Okay? The Pittsburgh Steelers sucked for many years under Bill Cowher. Why? Because they rooted a system, they put a system in place, and if they had to get rid of an offensive coordinator and bring somebody else in, then that's what they did. Dick LeBeau, he came with the package. So they didn't have to worry about it because the Steelers had one of the best defenses in the league. They were always top 10. All right? And you want to know something? The Jets were also in that conversation until we started messing with it, until we started tinkering with it, until Casey Rogers somehow developed a vagina instead of a testicle, instead of a pair of testicles and a penis. Okay? And Todd Bowles on Sunday, okay, somehow forgot that he had a penis and a pair of testicles when he decided to punt on 4th down, being down by 9. Instead of just being the gambler, knowing you got nothing to lose and you're playing with house money, take a friggin' shot. Don't just sit there and wave the white flag and roll over on your back. I mean, it infuriates me.
No 7-second delay on that one.
Me. You know, it infuriates me and it aggravates me because as a fan, I want to see this team succeed. I want to see them do it the right way. But you know what? The incessant bitching from the fan base is just something we can all do about. We can all do without. If you're going to bitch about it, don't root for this team. Just don't.
No, listen, CJ, I get you, but at the same time, look, I hate the people, and I know what you're talking about. You're talking about like the Joe Beningo crowd where the sky is always falling and everything's bad and nothing's ever good.
Please.
But I think there's a fine line between that and the people that are, I guess you would call them almost, Joe Cavarosa jokes and calls them that they're like state TV, right, where everything's always great and always trust the process and, you know, this guy is great and this coach is good.
Let me stop you there for a second.
Mm-hmm.
You know I love Joe, okay? I
sure.
love Joe to death. I love you guys. I love your. I love the Play Like a Jet podcast. I recently added you guys to my playlist and podcast addict. I love what you guys do over there and Turn on the Jets. I really do.
Appreciate it.
But I got to say one thing: where me and Joe are polar opposites, I don't buy the tank bullshit. I don't buy it. Because these are professional athletes, and I don't think these professional athletes go into this locker room every day and say, okay, guys, let's lose by 40. Okay, guys,
no.
today we're going to lose by 50. Okay? No. Okay? I don't give a shit if the first overall pick is at stake. I want to see a bunch of young, hungry pups go out there and bust their asses and give 110% on that field, whether it's in MetLife Stadium, whether they're playing in Cambodia, whether they're playing in North Korea.
Sure.
They could play in freaking Moscow. I'd
love to see the North Korea. I'd love to see the North Korea Jets. I think that'd be a.
That would be something else, right?
The NFL's next exposition game.
So, but here's the thing, and the reason why I say it is I say it not only for the casual fan, but also for the younger fan who is just going and getting their first taste of football. I want to see them go and see these professional athletes go and play their asses off because they care about the name on the front of the uniform and not the one on the back. They care about the city and the franchise that they're playing with. Aren't you guys all sick and tired of the rest of the NFL making the New York Jets as just the punchline every single week in every single tabloid? I know I've gotten to the point where I don't read it anymore. Because otherwise, if I read it, I would call up every single New York radio station. I'd be banned from them because I would want them all hung by their balls. Okay? Especially Manish Bennett.
Yeah, no, CJ, I got you. I think, look, I don't think anybody wants these guys to lay down and not try. I think most people, at least, I mean, maybe there are a few. I think the main thing here isn't so much you want the guys to not try. You want them to try, and you want especially the young players. We talked about Adams and May specifically, but Adams obviously is the one who had a really good game on Sunday. You want to see those guys show life and show progress and play well and so on and so forth. But here's where I think it comes into play, the tank versus the no tank or whatever. I don't think you necessarily have to actively root against the team, but you also have to recognize, and I've used this many times, and I'll use it again here, you've got to keep the long term in mind as opposed to just the short term sometimes. And what I mean by that is, and I said this before, and I'll say it until my face pops off probably, but if you go back to 2014 as a perfect example, when the Jets won that game against the Titans in December that did absolutely nothing for them, they ended up with Leonard Williams, who, again, is an excellent defensive player, and he'll be here for a while. But the Titans, who were the ones that ended up losing that game and thus ended up with the second pick in draft, got Marcus Mariota, who looks to be a franchise-changing quarterback. The type the Jets really haven't had. Look, you talked before about the Walton years and stuff like that.
Wait, Scott, the one thing I will say there is the Jets, you have to remember, the Jets did win their last game as well. I know everybody likes to throw that Titans game around, and who knows, maybe if they lost that game, they might have lost the Dolphins game as well. But the Jets did win 2 games at the end there. You're right. If they had lost both, the Titans would have had the tiebreaker, and then if they lost the Dolphins game, they'd be 2-14. But it's not like that was the last game of the season if the Jets won or lost, but that is a valid point that the Jets could have gotten their franchise quarterback had they lost that game in another one. But sorry, continue.
Right, and exactly, and that's what I'm kind of getting at. And you CJ, you talked about the Walton years and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, the funny thing about Ken O'Brien is he never gets enough credit because, the Jets messed up, obviously, by picking him over Marino, but O'Brien was a really good quarterback for a significant period of time, and Pennington was too, and the Jets have had, it's been few and far between.
I got nothing against Ken O'Brien.
Okay? Right.
I really don't. I like Ken O'Brien. I was a big Ken O'Brien fan, believe it or not. At that point, Ken O'Brien, Freeman McNeil, Al Toon, Wesley Walker, Johnny Hector. How could you forget those guys? I mean,
Mickey Schuler.
They were staples. Right, Mickey Schuler. I mean, Mickey Schuler used to run through a wall and carry people through him. Okay? I mean, this is what I want our current New York Jets to look at their past.
Sure.
And forget about the negativity.
They should all listen to my podcast.
Just
plug.
Right. There we go. I mean, look.
More plugs than Donald Trump, bro.
I've had Bobby Jackson on my podcast. Okay, not once but twice. And Bobby Jackson, believe it or not, is how I became a New York Jets fan because I loved Bobby Jackson. Yes. I loved Bobby Jackson. And he was one of my favorite players growing up. And I will never forget.
The hell of a player.
He told me, Wesley Walker, okay, legally blind in one eye. Still one of the best NFL receivers that were out there. I never knew that about Wesley Walker. Okay?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was blind in one. Yeah, absolutely, which is amazing considering what he was able to accomplish in the pros. Yeah.
Right. And To me, it just when I look at the grit and I look at the grittiness, the toughness, the just like, you know what, we don't care what the media says. We don't care what the NFL thinks. We're going to go out and we're going to punch you in the face, and if we go down, you're going to come down swinging. You're going to know that when you leave MetLife Stadium, you're going to be black and blue, and we may lose, but you're going to leave black and blue. That's the bottom line. And that's how it was in 1988 too. And Eric McMillan has talked about that on my show, where he's saying, look, we didn't really care what the media had to say about us, or that they picked us fourth to finish fourth in the division or anything like that. We knew we could play, and so we just tuned them out and went out there and we smacked guys around and we busted their butts, and they ended up finishing 8-7-1 that year. And when nobody thought that they would, they actually ended up giving a Gatorade pass to Joe Walton unexpectedly at the end of the season. But that's right. But the thing that I'm getting at, out of the playoffs that year.
That's right. They sure did.
Yeah, they knocked the Giants out of the playoffs on the very last game of the year when they won. And I remember Al Toon caught the game-winning touchdown.
Yep.
And then the Giants had to wait for the 49ers. The 49ers had to lose, and the 49ers ended up winning. I think they won by 40.
Sure.
So the Giants got eliminated by the playoffs. The 49ers ended up winning the Super Bowl that year.
Right.
If I'm right.
Yes, that was 1988, the year that the Niners beat the Bengals in the Super Bowl, the famous Joe Montana drive. That was one of the better Super Bowls of all time. But, listen, my main point here is that this is all about getting that quarterback that the Jets haven't had in forever. I mean, we thought that it might be Chad Pennington, and then he tore his shoulder out. And Ken O'Brien was a good quarterback, but he was never an elite-level player. It was Namath really was the last guy, and it's been a really long time. And so what I'm saying is what you don't want is for this team to do what they did and then, win 2 games in December, as you pointed out, and end up with a really good player, even a Jamal Adams or a Leonard Williams, at the expense of somebody like Marcus Mariota. And this particular draft, you've got arguably 4 guys, at least as of now, and this could change as Jeff Lloyd always likes to joke. There's a lot that goes on between September and April, but there's 4 guys that could be top 10 picks, and for all we know, they could end up being the first 4 guys picked in the draft, just based on the fact that quarterbacks always end up going first. And what you don't want to happen is that because the Jets won a meaningless game or 2, now they're going to either miss out on that guy altogether, or they're going to have to trade all these draft picks that they need to use to rebuild the roster and able to look. You talk about the pick, Ben, before that they got from Seattle, which is going to end up being the equivalent of almost an early third-round pick. Well, look, you go back, Eric McMillan was picked with the 63rd pick in the draft, which now would be a second-round pick. Back then it was an early third-rounder. If the Jets have to use that pick to trade up as opposed to using it on somebody that turns out to be Eric McMillan or James Hasty or, like you said before, Johnny Hector, or JoJo Townsell or somebody like that, well, now you've done your team another disservice. So I don't expect these guys to roll over. Quite the contrary. I want them to play hard. But I think that understanding, and like you said, I said the exact same thing. Ben was laughing as I said it, that I view the 2017 season as basically an entire year of preseason games. And so the whole objective here to me, CJ, is you want this team to play well, but you also, and you want the young players to develop, but you also, the end result of the game doesn't matter, just the individual performances, because you want to see who on this team is going to be a guy that you can have for the long haul and be a building block for when you get that quarterback, whether it's Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen or Josh Rosen or Sam Darnold or somebody else. And so that's really what it's about to me. And that's why Dalton Osorio said, he's like, look, you can't have it both ways. If you're getting really mad at Todd Bowles about the punting down 9 in the fourth quarter, and yet you're going to sit there and say, well, you want the quarterback and who cares who wins, well, then you shouldn't be getting mad. And that's kind of how I am now, to be honest with you. I'm sort of apathetic as far as the end result, because I don't view the end result of the game as important, because I feel like the 2017 season is just them.
deciding. It's a season-long audition for players to see who's going to be here for the duration of the rebuild and who's not going to be here. And so I'm just looking to see these guys play well, and I want to see May and Adams and those guys continue to play well, or May to start to play well. But I also am cognizant of the fact that I do not want this team to win 4 or 5 games rather than 2 or 3 if it comes down to it, because it does nothing for you in the short term and it kills you in the long term, because if you end up either missing out on one of these quarterbacks or having to trade assets that you desperately need to get one of those quarterbacks and now you've screwed the rest of your roster up, that's not something that's good for the Jets either. So I understand what you're saying, but I also think that you may be misunderstanding what Joe is trying to convey with the tank thing. I think what he's saying is that it's advantageous for the Jets to maybe, not for fans to not necessarily get riled up about a loss here or there in a season that ultimately doesn't really matter, and instead kind of focus on the positives of the young players and then, wait and see the main event, which is April 2018, if that makes any sense.
That's the thing. It just if you take a look at social media now, all it is just bitching about how McCagnon should be fired, how Bowles should be fired, and so on and so forth. But, again, if we continue every 2 to 3 years to fire a general manager and fire a head coach and bring in another general manager and another head coach, it takes anywhere between a full 2 to 3 years for any type of offensive or defensive system, or even special teams for that matter, to take root, to lay foundation, and for players to understand, to be fundamentally sound in the way that the franchise expects you to play. There is no such a thing anymore of being able to go out and get high-priced free agent talent. They're going to spray them with the holy water, okay? And all of a sudden everybody is going to know how to play, and this is going to be a team of all-stars, and this, that, and the third. That's all. It's all a crock of shit. I'm going to be honest with you. I watched the Yankees do it. The Yankees in the 80s threw good money after bad, bringing in Mike Witt, who threw a no-hitter, and he never won another game for the rest of the 2-year contract that he was with the Yankees. Dave LaPointe, Paul Ossenmacher, the $725,000 man for throwing a total of 16 pitches in a 162-game season. Okay?
Eddie Lee Whitson.
I mean, it's. I watched the Rangers do it in the late 90s.
Sure.
Okay, I don't want to see Mike McCagnon with an $80 million payroll say, well, you know what? We're going to build the team through free agency. No, I don't want. I want to see good, solid drafting. And you know what? If Todd Bowles is going to be this head coach, then Todd Bowles has got to be the head coach for the next 5 years. And people are going to have to like it. and that's it. You need to develop either a offensive system, a defensive system, a special team system, and it has to be consistent. The same way Bill Cowher went through his growing pains, John Gruden went through his growing pains, Tony Dungy went through his growing pains, Bill Belichick went through his growing pains. All of a sudden, Belichick has gotten, which makes me laugh. All of a sudden, Belichick has gotten all this success in New England. Okay, everybody forgets that Cleveland, even when he was the head coach over there, was a friggin' dumpster fire when he was there. That he couldn't find his ass with 2 hands and a map.
Well, that's not true. They made the playoffs a few times with him as the head coach, but he was in an impossible situation because they were moving the team, and so they kind of. But I understand what you're saying. I think the main thing here with Bowles and McCagnon is ultimately you have to ask yourself one question with each guy, and if the answer is no, you move on. If the answer is yes, you keep him. And the question is with McCagnon, do I trust this guy to pick the next quarterback? And with Bowles, do I trust this guy to, if not develop him himself, hire the right guy to develop whoever that quarterback is? And with Bowles and McCagnon, it's a tricky situation. I think McCagnon's draft record has been very up and down. There's been some good, there's been some bad. I think we kind of have to see how this draft class plays out, but it's a tricky situation with him. With Bowles, also tricky, but I'll tell you, he looks worse and worse every week, and I'm starting to think that as the season goes on, the chances of him coming back next year are going to be slimmer and slimmer. But ultimately, I think the analogy I used earlier, and Ben, I think, liked this because he likes the idea of doing bulk shopping, I think, right, Ben? When we do the Costco, the Costco and Stop and Shop thing. The way I look at it is the draft is Costco. That's where you do the bulk of your purchases, right? And that's where you stock up. And Stop and Shop is free agency. That's where you get your fill-ins. Oh, I ran out of bananas. Let me stop at the store on the way home from work. I ran out of milk. Let me get some milk on the way home from work. But the bulk of what you have comes from Costco, and I think that's the draft. Free agency is where you sign a couple of pieces here and there to kind of fill in what you may not have that you drafted or that you have homegrown talent. But, look, obviously the best teams in the league are all built through the draft. Look at the Packers, and you mentioned the Steelers and so on and so forth.
But you see, here's the thing. I totally agree with everything that you were saying. The only thing, though, is that if we're talking about the draft, if we're talking about a head coach, it all starts there. And
sure.
If we can't trust Maccagnan to draft that next franchise quarterback after he picked friggin' Christian Hackenberg in the second round, okay,
right, and Bryce Petty in the fourth,
Bryce Petty in the sixth round, and they're trying to run both of them out of town, okay. Now that's just one indictment of them, okay. Now Bowles, with his questionable coaching decisions, granted he's a rookie head coach, he's going to have his growing pains. This is if you think about it, his third year.
Right.
Okay, so when do you say, okay, yeah, we could go and we could do our your bulk shopping with the 2018 draft, but the question is Maccagnan going to be buying the groceries?
Well, yeah, that's
cooking the meal.
That's the question you got to answer right now.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, that's the question you have got to answer. Do you trust Maccagnan to, as you said, shop for the groceries, and do you trust Bowles to cook the meals properly? And that ultimately comes down to the draft as a whole, but really more specifically the quarterback position, because that is where everything begins and ends. I mean, there's exceptions, but we know that if you have a franchise quarterback, you are much, much more likely to be able to build a long-term contender. If you don't, yeah, you can contend here and there, but if you really want to be that long-term, perennial, year-by-year contender, generally those teams have top-level quarterbacks. You've got a Tom Brady or a Ben Roethlisberger or somebody along those lines. So that's really the question. And look, at the end of the year, we'll have a clearer picture, but that's something that Jets ownership is going to have to sit down, and obviously, we can say what we want about Woody or his brother. That's kind of neither here nor there at this particular juncture, but you're going to have to sit down, and you're going to have to say to yourself, look, this is arguably the most important draft that the Jets have had in forever. They cannot afford to get it wrong. So is Maccagnan the guy you trust, yes or no, to get the quarterback and rebuild this thing? Is Bowles the guy that you trust to develop the quarterback, the crown jewel, if you will? And that's the question that's got to be answered. I mean, right now, I don't know. I mean, I could see arguments either way on Maccagnan. I could see arguments either way on Bowles, although Bowles is looking worse and worse by the week. But that's what's going to have to get answered. And I'll tell you, man, if they pick, God help us all, if they pick a quarterback, let's say they get the first pick and they have their pick of quarterbacks and they pick a quarterback and it turns out to be the wrong one. Like, let's say they turn out to pick Todd Blackledge instead of Dan Marino or Jim Kelly. Oh, this is going to be, that happens and we're all going to be so depressed.
It's a nightmare. It's like the Chargers picking Ryan Leaf.
Right.
Actually, I think the worst case scenario is if they get the first overall pick and then they pick like a defensive end or a pass rushing. Or they just completely don't even. I mean, unless they get the number one overall pick and they take Saquon Barkley, who they feel is going to be like the next Ezekiel Elliott, and then they're confident that Lamar Jackson falls to the second round or whatever. But TJ, and Scott here. I mean, you guys have pretty much said everything there is to say, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I'll run through this really quickly. CJ, as I said at the beginning of the show, and again I want to cite it, this is from @Drew from Jersey. Cheer for 16 wins, expect 16 losses. It's not going to matter what you do. Look, I think, CJ, I am tired like you, and I'm sure Scott, of being the laughingstock of the NFL, but really the only is winning 6 games going to change that? No. What's going to change that is if you go in there and you take, you get Sam Darnold or Josh Rosen or whoever you think is going to be the top quarterback.
I think I'm maybe one of like 2 people in the world, okay, that don't want Sam Darnold. And the reason being is because every quarterback at a USC, I know regular Joe is probably going to like roast me when I go back on Talk Jets Radio, but you know what? I don't give a shit. Okay, every quarterback that comes out of USC, not named Carson Palmer, sucks. It happened with me.
All right, hold on, but you have to acknowledge this is a much different USC team. I mean, who was the last USC quarterback to come out? I mean, I guess Cody Kessler came out. He's okay, I guess, but as a backup. But you have to remember, I mean, the whole USC curse. I mean, that was under Pete Carroll.
I don't believe in curses.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll say this: if he's the best guy, you take him. But regardless,
100%.
Even if it's Josh Rosen, who I wasn't as impressed with in his huge comeback, because I mean, he easily could have lost that game a few times or some of those passes. But whoever it is, we'll have months and months and months to decide based on, as Scott, you keep saying. I mean, it's a lot of time between now and the draft. I mean, there's this entire season.
Right.
There's the NFL season. There's the combine. There's workouts. All this stuff. I mean, some guy could get hurt. Some guy could come out of nowhere. You never know. But okay, whoever it is. But CJ, I mean, the only way the Jets change the circus atmosphere is if they get that guy. If they have now they have a young team. Now they're rebuilding it, and hopefully they have as many picks as possible. That's why I'm kind of in favor of if you can get rid of Forte for a 7th, you do it. If you can get Powell and you can get a 3rd or something from a contender, you do it. If you can get if you can get Mo for a 5th or any sort of thing, you do it, and you stockpile as many picks as you can. Let's say the Jets enter this draft with 12 picks. Not that we want another, into 12, but you stockpile with as many guys as you can, and that's the way you change the atmosphere. Is okay, now you have your young quarterback, you have a young team, they're playing well. Maybe they win 8 games or whatever. Maybe they sneak into the wild card. Who knows? But that probably won't happen. But that's the way you change it. Winning 5 or 6 games with Josh McCown is going to do it. I'm going to cheer for 16 wins. I'm not going to sit there and cheer for losses unless we get to December and we're in a situation where we're kind of neck and neck with the team, battling for the number 1 pick, then I might cheer for the Jets to lose. But right now, no, in September, I'm not going to cheer for the Raiders on Sunday. I'm going to cheer for the Jets, and I'll be happy if they win, and I'll find, peace if they lose. I'll understand, okay, look, I mean, it's for the best. I'm fine with all that, but it's to build long-term success. You build through the draft. I mean, the Jets are, look, I'd rather be, I don't want to be stuck in limbo for any longer as a Jets fan. I don't want to be the team picking, 14th overall every year. I don't want to be one of those teams. The Saints are one of those teams now. The Texans were one of those teams for a while. You can go down the line of teams that have been like that aren't making the playoffs or just missing it, and they're just sitting there. I mean, the Eagles have been one of those teams. I mean, I don't want to be those teams. I'd either rather be dog crap and be terrible and then just keep going into the lottery until you get it, and that's the only way you shoot up from worst to first. I hope the Jets can be the next Atlanta Falcons, who kind of came out of nowhere. But in order to do that, they need to get young talent, and it starts with the quarterback. So I'm not going to cheer for them to lose. And really quickly, I will say this.
Carlos and I were freaking screaming at the top of our lungs when Dan Quinn was available for Dan Quinn to go to the Jets. We were screaming for Dan Quinn to go there.
I was a Dan Quinn fan myself, but look, I'll say this: I wasn't like I was angry at the Bulls fire. I was like, all right. I mean, it was interesting that because it felt like it sounded like Bulls wasn't their first choice. It sounded like Quinn was their first choice, but they were fearing that they were going to lose Quinn to Atlanta, and if they let Bulls leave, then he could go to Buffalo or wherever. But as I was going to say, I mean, not that any player that we've had on the show, and I'm going to wrap this up really quickly. We'll cover some last topics, and we'll get going. But what was I going to say here? Not that anybody we've had on the show would be 100% truthful, but for every player we've talked to, they have said the same sentiment. This team isn't tanking, and I agree with that. Players don't tank.
Sure.
Now you can argue that maybe some veterans. I'm not going to throw names, and I like Muhammad Wilkerson, so I don't think this is the reason, but we'll use him as an example. Maybe Muhammad Wilkerson, and I don't think he even has to do anything with tanking. I think it just has to do something with being on a bad team. if he knows, look, this team's not going to the playoffs, is he going to play as hard? Probably not. Whereas if he's in that, week 16 or week 17 against Buffalo, he's going to be trying his, butt off. He's trying to get to the playoffs. He's trying it for the first time in his career. But, when he knows this team's bad, he's probably not going to put all his effort in. And I'm just using him as an example. I'm not saying that that's what he's doing. I still think maybe he's hurt. Maybe that leg really did screw him up. Maybe that is the reason. Who knows? But I do believe the front office is I think tanking is a poor word. Because I don't think the Jets are, in a sense, purposely just trying to be god-awful and suck. What they're trying to do is rebuild through the draft, but they're really just, they're hitting the reset button is what they're doing. They are, okay, let's, what purpose...
Button? Wait a second. If this is hitting the reset button, are you sure, did they actually tap it? Did they do the Staples button?
No, CJ, this is the real thing. I know they have done, but CJ, I know they have done that, in 2014, but you look at what did they do in 2014? They started to do it. They did the exact same thing. Okay, they cut Sanchez, they cut Holmes, they cut whoever. They started to do it. They're moving ahead with Geno Smith, but then they got lost there a bit, and they got some pretty shitty old veterans. And where they really got lost when they brought McCagnon in, and it was a good move for the time. And then they signed 12 all-star free agents, which is good. But you saw it was a 1-year success. They sold their soul for 1 year of success. So what I'm trying to say is, no, they're hitting the reset button. They're blowing it up. What purpose does Brandon Marshall serve on this team? None. Eric Decker, I mean, maybe he'd be useful for right now, but, pretty much none. He had 1 catch for 7 yards or something in that game. Obviously, Ryan Fitzpatrick serves no purpose. Darrelle Revis, none. Marcus Gilchrist, none. Then you can go to some guys who actually, maybe we could have gone after in free agency. None. The Jets were just blowing it up. Okay, let's get this back to the foundation. Let's build around these young guys. We have Quincy Nunn, we have Leonard Williams, this pre-draft, but we'll say we have Jamal Adams. We have these guys. Okay, this is our base. We're going to build around these guys. And now we're going to go into this season. We're going to play as many young guys as possible. I don't think Josh McCown's going to be starting for much longer. You're going to see Bryce Petty, Christian Hackenberg. You're going to see, I believe, I have to trust that they're going to, play guys like Elijah McGuire more, or Darius Stewart, Chad Hansen. Get those guys reps. For when the Jets aren't good, they're going to have reps. They've put starters for a while. Get all these guys experience. Start building your foundation. Have a little thing going, and at the end of the season, you probably won't have that good of a record. You might be 2-14. Hey, but you have a nice little team. You have some young pieces. You have a good, safety duo. You have Leonard Williams in the trenches. Maybe Darren Lee's a good, outside linebacker type of guy. Josh Martin's a guy that's coming up. Justin Burrs. I mean, there are pieces. You obviously have holes. Your roster looks like Swiss cheese. But then you can go into free agency and say, okay, who are some young role players we can sign? You get those guys. And then you go to the draft. You've traded some guys. You cut some guys. You got some compensatory picks and everything. Let's say you enter with 12 picks. That's when you start addressing it. And after that, that's when the Jets are going to go again. And hopefully what they don't do is they don't end the season and they sign, Le'Veon Bell or some huge free agent. They need to stick to this. And if they stick to this for this next year, and I'm not saying, and I think this is the only year that the Jets the front office is going to kind of try to not lose, but not really put all their chips in the basket. Once they've done that, once they've done the season, I think you're going to start to see, 2018 is going to be improvements. They might be 8-8 with a young quarterback, 9-7, and then next year, I think 2019 is the year that the Jets are going to really take off into that, franchise that we've hoped they can be. But that's the process, CJ. And look, Josh McCown playing and them winning 5 or 6 games just perpetuates the cycle. It keeps it going, and then you push the year you can be good to 2020 and 20. The Jets are saying enough. Really quickly, I want to talk to each of you. You kind of touched on it. Of do you trust Bowles and McCagnon? I'm done on Bowles. I think I've seen enough on Todd Bowles. He'll get the rest of the season because who you're going to stick John Morton down on the sideline? Maybe if you get to November and it's this bad, still maybe. But I think Bowles is done. He just does. You need to be a good clock manager and game manager as a head coach in this league. He does not, and it's comical because it seems like at least everybody who's calling into this podcast could have managed that game better. Which, I'm not trying to make the statement that any of us are a better head coach than Todd Bowles, but if the Jets were to hire a clock manager, a guy who literally just manages the game, okay, Todd, you need to do this, they could hire anybody who calls into this podcast, anybody on Twitter, and I guarantee they would have done a better job than Todd Bowles, which is almost laughable. It's like, Todd, how it's pretty easy, black and white, to understand that best case scenario, if you punt the ball, you're getting the ball back, no timeouts with 3 minutes to go down 2 score. You're not going to win this game. He does not know how to do that. He seems incompetent. I just do not trust him to. He just seems to always make the wrong decision. I like Todd Bowles as a person. I think some of the players on this team like him, but I think the Jets need to not bring him back. CJ, I am in agreement with you. I don't know if this is your stance, but as you're saying, firing a GM every 3 years is not the way to win. I think the Jets should keep Mike Maccagnan, let him keep building his roster, give him another year. I think this year wasn't really him trying his hardest. As you said, I think in free agency he's not trying to get, could he have convinced some top-notch free agents and they could have won some more games? Sure, but he's doing what I was just talking about. So I bring Maccagnan back. I liked, in 2015 he did exactly what he needed to do. He made this team a winner. In 2016 wasn't as good this year, but he's been a somewhat solid drafter. The 2015 draft is his real bad one besides Leonard Williams. But look, I like Maccagnan. I like what he can do, and I think you give him a few years and he can be good. I think the Jets should replace Bowles after this year. I guess I'll start with you, CJ, and I guess this will be our last topic, I guess, and then we'll talk about we'll just do really quickly Raiders-Jets game, and then we'll sign off. But CJ, I'll start with you. As far as firing Bowles, moving on, what is your take on that?
I think that if you're going to fire Bowles, you fire him now and get it over with. I really do. I know that it's comical for all Bush League for teams to fire a head coach at the beginning of the year or so on, but if they have zero confidence in him being able to develop this young personnel and to be able to mold these players into competent professional players where they're going to go out and they're going to bust their asses every single day. And we all keep hearing about this word, accountability, okay? And again, at the end of the Bills game, all we kept hearing was, that's just the way it was. I was waiting for the classic, without going too much into it, I was waiting for the classic, well, Coach, why'd you punt on fourth down, being down by 9? Oh, well, our defense was holding them, so I figured that we'd be able to get a stop and then get the ball back. All right, you idiot. Do you realize you need 2 scores? 2 scores. You had less than 4 minutes on the clock. 2 scores in order to get back into this game, okay? But, nevertheless, I don't want to trail off topic, but personally, I think for me, if you're going to fire Bowles, you fire Bowles. And Casey Rogers goes with him. Personally, I think, to be honest with you, Casey Rogers should have been fired last year. Okay, I think they should have brought in a different defensive coordinator, and Todd Bowles should concentrate on one thing, which is managing this team from the 30,000 feet view like he likes to talk about. Okay, you have John Morton take care of the offense, you have somebody else come in and take care of the defense, and that's it. Jeff Fish is available. Bring him in. He can't freaking do any worse.
Oh, no. He is terrible for the tank. He will get us to 7-9. We can't do that. We cannot do that. He will get us right to the cusp of mediocrity. But no, I agree with you, CJ, and you really just have to hope that another Kyle Shanahan comes along, because he was a guy that I really liked coming off a good year in Atlanta. I hope just another young offensive-minded head coach comes around. This Jets job will be attractive. GM or head coach, it'll be attractive. Scott, your take on firing Bowles? Do you think are you pretty much done with the Todd Bowles experiment?
I give him to the end of the year because why not? What do you have to lose? And if he turns it around or seems to learn something, then you can consider him, I guess. But the big question with him is he anything more than, and Dalton Asario and I have talked about this, is he anything more at this point than a less charismatic Rex without the early success that Rex had when he first came in here? Because a lot of the things that we're seeing out of Todd Bowles are very similar to the things that we would complain about with Rex Ryan. And so, look, ultimately why I thought Rex had to go above all other reasons is that I never believed that if they got a quarterback that he could be properly developed under Rex Ryan. And there were other reasons that I felt that Rex had to go, but that was the number one reason. And so I've got to see something here that would make me even come close to believing that Todd Bowles could lead a staff that could develop whoever that quarterback ends up being into a franchise quarterback.
Give me another Belgian white.
I've seen I've seen nothing along the.
I think he's ordering food. So Scott, continue.
Yeah, I just realized that. That's why I paused. I'm like, is he ordering something, or is he talking about a player that I've never heard of?
So listen, I got a beer for you over here, Scott. Don't worry.
All right, great. But no, listen. My main thing is, I think that's the question you have to answer. I'm willing to give him till the end of the year to figure it out, but being how important this draft is going to be, if you're not convinced that this guy is going to be able to manage a staff that can develop a quarterback, then you got to move on from him. And the Cagnon, you're going to have to ask that question about him as well as far as picking the guy. I would lean towards, I suspect that by the end of the year I will probably be in the camp of it's time for Bowles to go. Right now I'm leaning in that direction, but I'm willing to give him the rest of the season to figure it out and change my mind. I don't think he will, but I figure at this point, what does it hurt? I will say this, though. It doesn't necessarily have to be an offensive-minded coach that you hire. As long as it's a guy that can come in here, even if it's a defensive guy, as long as he's a guy that knows how to hire the right person. You could be a defensive-minded guy, but you have an offensive coordinator or a quarterback guy in mind that you know that you can bring with you or that you can hire that can get that job done. I mean, Bill Parcells was not an offensive – he didn't have an offensive pedigree. He was from the defensive side of the ball. And the same thing with Bill Belichick. But obviously, though, they know how to pick the right guys to do what they need to do. I think ultimately, if you get rid of Bowles, the number one choice is the guy that would never come here, and that's Josh McDaniels. I don't think he ever takes this job. Who would you replace Todd Bowles with if you did get rid of him? I mean, I'd have to really sit down and think about that right now. Like I said,
it's a long ways away. But I think that was a great point you made there. And I recently just read Tony Dungy's book, and he talked about the importance of assistant coaches and because I mean, when you're a head coach, you don't really get to be as hands-on with an individual player as you'd like to be. You have to watch over an entire team over 3 different units. And I think that's part of the problem is Bowles is trying to focus on the defense or whatever. But the assistant coaching staff is so important to an NFL team. And I really think that's part of the thing that they've gotten wrong. The Jets have just never had the right combination of head coach, offensive coach, the special teams coach, and then even positional coaches, because those are the guys that get to work hands-on with the guy, get to really, develop him. A head coach can't really do that. Todd Bowles can't really sit down with a guy like, Darren Lee day in and day out and really get to work on what he does. I mean, he might be able to briefly do it, but that's going to be on the linebackers coach. That's his job to do it. It's just the assistant coaches are just so important. I think that's a good time. I think this is a good place to end it. I think we've pretty much talked about everything. We could talk about a little bit more stuff from the Buffalo game, but the overall summary is some positives, but a lot more negatives. And it's just exactly what I mean. I think we have the soundbite somewhere if I can find it in time. But this team is exactly this team is exactly, and I'll give Dennis Green the mic.
But they are who we thought they were, and we let them off the hook.
They are exactly who we thought they were. The New York Jets are not a very good football team. And I think that's a good way to end it. I think, look, as I said, there are young guys to cheer for in this team. You got to hope that we see guys like Petty, like in Hackenberg, and like McGuire, more of Stewart and Hansen. Looking forward to see some of the more young offensive linemen. I liked what I saw from Justin Burris and some of the safeties. You have to cheer for those guys, look for those guys, but this isn't going to be a very fun season. I think the only thing that'll make it fun is a young team that plays in a lot of games, but hopefully this team can right the ship in the future. All right, I guess I'll round the circle here one more time. CJ, and then I'll go to Scott, or I guess we'll do CJ. I'll have CJ sign off because I know you have some stuff to talk about with your show. We'll sign off, then I'll go to Scott, give his predictions about it, and then we'll end the show. So, CJ, I'll start with you. Your predictions for this Sunday against the Raiders, what are you expecting? I mean, as far as score total goes, and then just the overall game, the atmosphere and everything. What are your expectations for this Sunday?
Well, the expectations, I mean, obviously the Jets are probably going to lose this game. But what I do look for is I look to see better improvement from the offense versus the Raiders. I think that the Raiders, again, pose an interesting challenge to the Jets. I think the Jets will be able to poke and prod the Raiders a little bit be able to irritate them, but I still don't think that it's going to be enough for the Jets to overcome them. I don't expect the Raiders to put 40 and 50 points up like I'm seeing on social media. I think this is again going to be a tight game. However, I do fully expect Beast Mode to be what Beast Mode normally does, which is, put up 130, 140 yards on the ground against the Jets, unless they find a way to shore up that defensive line. Jets offense, Jermaine Kearse, again, he's going to have to be a little bit more involved in the play calling in order to free up those like Robbie Anderson. I want to see Sharon Peak. I want to see more Ardarius Stewart. I think that they can exploit Oakland's secondary. They can be susceptible to the long ball. And I think that John Morton needs to do one thing, and one thing with this offense is not play scared. And Todd Bowles needs to realize that he has a penis and a pair of testicles, and if he's down by 9, he needs to go for it. Even if you crash and burn, I think it's much better in the face of the media and also in the face of the fan base to know that if you lose, you went down swinging, than opposed to just waving the white flag. So all I want to see an effort, but again, it's probably going to be another tough, grinded-out game to watch. It totally would not surprise me if I see a 30-21 score.
All right, well, we'll see, Jay. As always, I apologize for the start of your call. The program just said you were Sean Walsh. I was like, all right, I guess I don't know exactly what happened, but I apologize for that. And as always, I know Kyle's probably bummed he missed this, but I'm sure Scott enjoyed it. I always love having you call in. You're a very fiery caller. I think we're going to need a 7-second delay next time you call in. But we love having you on, man. One of the best Jets fans around. Really quickly, shout out your own podcast. I know you run a terrific show. I believe you have some big news as far as the network you joined and whatnot, so you can share that and then give out the handle where our listeners can give you and your show a follow.
Yeah, absolutely. It's obviously, my name is CJ DeSimone. I'm the host of the Jets Factor podcast on SoundCloud.com. You can find us on nyjetfans.com. We are part of the NY Jet Fans Media Network, along with Talk Jets Radio, along with other podcasts like Turn on the Jets and also the Jet Take and also No Fly Zone. So recently we have been invited and we have accepted an offer. We are now also to be found on Grandstand Sports Network, along with Rockpile Report, along with Numb Builds Fan podcast. There's a ton of football podcasts, hockey podcasts. Matter of fact, Kyle Smith from AFC East Bros, he goes on Rockpile Report all the time. We're happy that he is actually the main cog that introduced me to Drew Weir and Joe Erb. They introduced me to everybody. They liked what they heard. So now you can find us on Grandstand Sports Network. We're very excited about that. We're also on thegruelingtruth.net. We're on Google Play. We're on iTunes. You Google the Jets Factor podcast, you can find us. And we did not broadcast the show this past weekend, obviously, because of Hurricane Irma, and we had a power loss here, but now that the power is back, I will be broadcasting again this weekend, so I will have a new episode coming up, so stay tuned on social media for that. Scott, I welcome you to come on to the show whenever you have a moment. Just if you're following me on Twitter, just shoot me a DM or with your email address, and we will hook it up. We'll love to have you guys on. Ben, you're always invited to come on. Kyle, when he picks himself up the floor, I already told him that he could come on. He said, he's got to come out from under the bed. He's still suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder from Hurricane Irma. So,
I would laugh at the joke, but Kyle has literally just been out the past few days, just like hanging out with his friends, playing He literally living life. He had a pool day today, then he's playing basketball. Kyle is not affected by this at all. He's milking it a bit, but no, I'm just kidding. But he's perfectly fine. He just doesn't have internet or power. But besides that, he's doing okay. But yes, when he comes back, CJ, we're coming on your show and wreaking havoc.
Yeah, you need to. Come on, man, because with Jets Factor podcast, we are real radio all the time. So you come on, you say it like it is.
And CJ, yeah, I'd love to come on too. I'll hit you up on Twitter. And listen, if you're still talking to Bobby Jackson, throw him my way. I'd love to have him on Play Like a Jet.
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I'm actually working on trying to get him on my show as well. Matter of fact, if I can get him on, I will arrange for the two of you to meet each other on my show. How's that sound?
Sounds perfect to me, man. I'll shoot you a DM, and I'll come on whenever you want me to come on, and we'll pick this up where we left off here. Some more fiery rants from both of us.
Absolutely.
All right, curse words,
Absolutely.
plugs. Yeah, curse words, plugs, and meeting arrangements, I guess, are going live on this show. But CJ, thank you so much, man, for calling in. Hope to hear from you next week after a earth-shattering Jets loss.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys as always for having me on. And by the way, I hope Sean Walsh, if he's listening, I hope I did you some justice with the rant and the fires that I put out there. I love you, Sean. You're awesome. I love you guys. Thank you again for having me on tonight.
Thanks for coming on, Sam, man. All right.
Thanks, CJ.
All right, well, that'll do it for CJ's call. Scott, our last thing, we could talk about the offensive line, but, that was really the only thing we didn't really cover. But I guess, I guess, Scott, your brief take on the offensive line, but as we're wrapping it up. I guess that's the one topic note that I have here that we just didn't talk about. So very quickly, because we got to do that, then we got to really quickly just give our rankings to the quarterbacks right now, and then our predictions. So we should be ending the show around 10:35 your time, so or hopefully before. So your talk on the offensive line.
I'll make it quick. Really, they played better than I expected, given how bad they were in the preseason. There's still obviously a lot of questions. We'll see what happens. Obviously, Carpenter and Winters are the two guys that we went into this thinking were established players, and they did what they do. Shell, I'm still optimistic about. We'll see if Wesley Johnson can turn things around. And Kelvin Beachum, again, it's going to be ongoing, monitoring him. A fine human being, but can he bounce back as a player and get back to the form that he was at when he was at Pittsburgh? We're going to find that out. So that's really all I have to say with the offensive line. Is they're a work in progress. They were better than I expected in week one, and we're going to see how they gel going forward.
Yeah, quick note on Shell, and again to cite Pro Football Focus, he was with an 80.1 overall grade. He was superb in pass protection, and he was the top offensive player for the Jets graded by Pro Football Focus. He across his 42 pass block attempts, he only surrendered one QB pressure, which was only a hurry. All right, well, that'll do it that'll do it for our talks. But, Scott, before I let you go, we have the wonderful Scott here. Before we do a plug for the show, and I know we've plugged your show a few times, your prediction for this Sunday, Jets-Raiders, just what are you expecting?
Oh, you want to do the quarterback stuff too?
Oh, sorry, my bad. I'm all over the place. So, yeah, we got to do that and then the quarterback stuff.
Okay. I think that CJ was probably being a little optimistic. I expect the Raiders to stomp a mud hole in the Jets. I think they're going to beat them pretty badly. I don't know about scoring 40 or 50 points, but I would expect them to cover the spread. I don't think the Jets are going to score very much. As you said, they always have trouble going across the country. I mean, most teams do. When I talked to Kerry Rhodes, he expressed just how difficult doing that is, especially going to play the Raiders. And the Raiders are just a much better team anyway. So I expect the Raiders to win by at least 2 touchdowns and cover the spread. If I were to take a quick guess, I would say maybe the final score is something like 27-10.
Yeah, I would say I don't think it's going to be at least I hope it's not going to be a complete shellacking. If I were to actually make a guess, I think it's going to be similar to that 2015 game, which, I guess was a pretty big shellacking. But the Jets, I think the Jets will ended up losing by just over a touchdown. But it was a pretty big gap. I think it's just going to be one of those games where the Jets are going to just be losing from the start. Might make a bit of a second-half push, maybe with Bryce Petty or Christian Hackenberg in quarterback, but they're going to end up losing by 10 points or whatnot. That's all I got to say. And then, for the quarterbacks, I guess, Scott, I'll give you out of the 4. We'll just do the 4 now. When Kyle comes back, we'll add a 5th guy for each week. But out of the 4, Rosen, Allen, Darnold, Jackson, give us your top 4 for right now.
It's weird. I was talking about this earlier today with Jeff Lloyd and Kerry Rhodes, and Lance Zierlein got involved in the conversation from NFL Network. I guess my rankings are a little different. I have Darnold at number 1, and the main reason is because overall I'm a guy who's a sucker for the quarterbacks that can make advanced reads, which Darnold is, to me, far and away the best at of the quarterback prospects. Jameis Winston is an example of somebody like that. That's why I was so sold on him coming out of Florida State, because I think when a guy has that kind of advanced football intelligence, the odds of him becoming a bust at the NFL level are much, much smaller. And I think that so Darnold is QB1 for me. Now, here's where I'm going to differ. A lot of people would have Rosen as QB1, or certainly, if not QB1, QB2. But who do you have at QB1?
I have Darnold as my number 1. I agree with you there.
Okay.
I mean, look, if you're playing well and reading NFL defenses as efficiently as you are, as you said, it's going to decrease your chance of being a bust. So I like him there, and I think if I were to go on a limb here, I think we're going to agree on this. I'm saying Lamar Jackson number 2 right now, and that's the same with you. I mean, I think people are falling into the stereotype that he is literally just a running quarterback, and he's not that. Can he run? Yes. Is he a very explosive running quarterback? But you even take that away from his game. I mean, he could throw the ball. He can really throw it, and I think the added mobility is great for him. The one thing I do worry about is his frame, and I know he has a very similar frame to Josh Rosen, but his frame combined with his mobility, when he gets out in the pocket, if he's going to take a hit from Bobby Wagner or whatever, how is he going to be? I like him a lot, though. Besides that, I mean, he had that one throw that was beautiful under pressure, just a nice bomb. After that, I'd probably go. Actually, I'll let you give your take on Jackson, and we'll go to our 3rd.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with pretty much everything you said. I think that the comparison that Lance Zierlein said that he doesn't really love doing the player comparisons. It's just something that people do because it's interesting to talk about. And there's no real clean comparison for Lamar Jackson because he's a unique talent in so many ways. I think the thing that's appealing to me about him is not only, like you said, can he make plays with his feet, but with his arm. People don't give him enough credit for what he can do with his arm, but people compare him to Michael Vick. I think he's got potential to be a much better passer than Michael Vick. He's got some flaws with his touch and ball placement, but the thing that I love about Lamar Jackson is that by all accounts, and Kerry Rhodes talked about this, and Kerry had him on a weekend show that he's doing in Arizona, I think it was on Fox Sports Radio. The thing about him is he's such a hard worker, and he is somebody that is such a humble kid, and he's always willing to do whatever he's got to do to improve. And his flaws are all very fixable flaws. So the things that he can do well are things you can't teach. But the things that he doesn't really do well are things that can be fixed. And I think that's very important. And here's the thing, too, from just an added bonus standpoint. I think that if you just imagine the excitement of having Lamar Jackson behind center for the Jets, and he goes back and he throws a 60-yard bomb to Robbie Anderson, or he gets away from 3 would-be tacklers and runs down the sideline for a 25-yard touchdown or something. The Jets haven't had an offensive playmaker that could do that kind of thing, like somebody that could literally score. Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, man, you could make that case. Yeah, well, Curtis Martin really wasn't that. The funny thing about Curtis Martin is, as great as Curtis Martin.
He was just a patient kind of like, he was going to wait for the whole development. He was great, but sorry, I know I cut you off there. So what were you going to say? No, not at all, man. Listen, it's your show. I'm just filling in, as they say. But I think that what I was going to say was is that the last time they've had a weapon like that, a guy that could literally reach the end zone on any play, was Leon Washington. And the thing about Leon Washington was, as great as he was, he wasn't an every down player, right?
But if you have a player like Lamar Jackson, I mean, like you said, the Jets haven't had a dynamic playmaker like that in, forever, really. And that is just something that, I start to drool when I think about it. So I think I have Darnold number one. It sounds like we're in lockstep on this for as far as what we're thinking with these guys and why we have them where we have them.
Yeah, and the last two for me are pretty close. If I was going to go, I would actually, and this isn't an indictment on if the fourth quarterback, I'm not saying this guy's going to be terrible. I think all four of these guys right now would go in the first round. So, and I think all four of these guys, if they're in the right situation, can be very good NFL quarterbacks. I would probably go right now with Josh Allen. I think that's probably who I'd go with number 3. I know he hasn't had the best games, but I think he has a lot of unteachable talent. And then I'd go Rosen, who's had 2 back-to-back good games. Well, I guess the first one he had the huge comeback. Didn't look amazing in it, but he made some good throws. He got lucky on a lot of those. I mean, he had a touchdown went right through the guy's arms. He got hit, and the ball landed in the end zone for UCLA. His second game, he looked a lot better. I think he was 22 for 25, 3 touchdowns, whatever. So I like Rosen a lot. I'd put him at 4 right now because I do like Allen, a lot of what he can do. This is, subject to change. But right now, if I were to do it, I would say Darnold, Jackson, Allen, Rosen, but they're all very close. It's not like, Darnold's only kind of pulling away because he has that, he's read NFL defenses, he's running a pro-style offense, he's, a pocket passer. I like all those things. So he's probably the only one that's pulling away. Jackson is very intriguing, so that's why he's kind of, separated from Rosen and Allen, and then Rosen and Allen are neck and neck. I could flip it to Rosen and then Allen, but right now I'll keep it Allen and Rosen just because I like a lot of the stuff that Allen can do. But Scott, the last take of the night, who are your 3 and 4 quarterbacks?
Yeah, man, I think you're right. I think you can't really go wrong with any of them. I would probably put Rosen ahead of Allen only because I get worried about a guy that's playing against inferior competition and doesn't have the weapons around him to really, I guess show what you can do, and you're kind of just taking blind faith on his arm talent alone. I kind of need to see more from him. But there's a lot of splits. Like I know Joe Malfa from TurnOnTheJets.com, he loves Josh Allen. He thinks Allen's the guy. Rosen to me is more of that gunslinger, so I think he also is going to be a first-round pick, like you said, but he worries me a little bit more for that reason because, as you said, as great as that comeback was, he did make a lot of and you have to take risks in situations like that, but he did make a lot of dangerous throws. When I say dangerous, I think he had 2 or 3 should have been very easy interceptions. I'm not trying to sound, like I can do it all, but I could have caught some of those interceptions. They were hitting those guys right in the hands or right in the gut, and they were just dropping them. So, you can go either way. Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think we're going to see this weekend will be interesting because all 4 of these guys are playing in interesting. Look, for me, unfortunately, as a Texas fan, I'm about to watch Sam Darnold carve up the Longhorns this weekend, but you're going to get an opportunity to see, and it's funny, a guy I work with is from Oregon, and by the way, he says it's Oregon, not Oregon, so Anybody that says it wrong, am I right? All
you have to do is ask me. I am so mad when everybody goes Oregon. It's Oregon.
Yeah.
It's pronounced Oregon.
He says that to me all the time. He goes, just remember, it's Oregon, not Oregon, so I'm like, yeah, but you know this, living where you live, that it's going to be interesting to watch Josh Allen against Oregon this week. And my friend who I work with is telling me that he's looking forward to watching Oregon beat up on Josh Allen. But yeah, Lamar Jackson has a big matchup this week too, and I'm looking forward to watching all these guys. But I'll tell you, I think this is an interesting quarterback class. I hope that when April comes around, we still feel the same way. I don't know at this point how that's going to turn out. We never do. Remember, 2 years ago, everybody thought Deshaun Watson was the lock, stock, and barrel #1 overall pick in the NFL draft, and then you fast forward, a year, and all of a sudden now he's going, more middle-ish of the first round as opposed to, going number one overall. And you have situations where Christian Hackenberg is the lock, stock, and barrel number one pick, and then 2 years later the Jets are getting laughed at for picking him in the second round. So nobody knows really what's going to happen. But if those four guys hold up, my advice is, I've told everybody, treat Saturdays as a Jets fan, treat that as your real day to watch good football, because the Jets are going to be so bad this year. Scout those quarterbacks, kind of have a good idea of what they can do, and just take solace in that preparing for April is going to be more or less what our jobs are going to be as Jets fans, to watch the guys that may be on the team in 2018. So it'll be interesting, though. You guys, is everybody in Oregon kind of pumped up about getting to see Josh Allen against the Ducks this week?
Well, I mean, look, I was thinking about going to the game. I just didn't have time to go to it, but it would have been interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think Oregon actually has a really good team this year. I like Taggart. I think he's kind of, they're bringing them kind of back to where they were, towards that Chip Kelly era. Oregon's quarterback Justin Herbert is, I mean, he actually played my high school quite a few times. So I remember watching him. I commentated the game when he was the quarterback, and he's really good. And he'll go to the NFL and he'll be a good quarterback. But he's fantastic. He's a sophomore this year, so he's not eligible for the draft or anything. But he's a fantastic quarterback, and I kind of, even though he played so my high school is Jesuit high school, even though he was one of Jesuit's rivals, when he was in high school, and I didn't really like him when he was there, I gotta say it would be pretty cool to have him go to the NFL and just say hey, I watched that guy play in person at least 5 times, and it was 3 times, and commentated for him. So I'm pretty excited if that happens.
Yeah, it should be a fun weekend all around. I'm really looking forward to it. And this weekend you can get ready for Saturday and Sunday. You can listen to Play Like a Jet. You go back in time. There it is. You knew it was coming. You can listen to Play Like a Jet.
Give out all your show information.
All right. I know. After I hang up, I guarantee Ben is going to go into his room and he's going to start throwing pins into the Scott Mason voodoo doll. He's going, oh my God, I can't believe I had to listen to this.
It's actually a dartboard, Scott. I have a lot of darts ready, and they're aimed right at your face, just pinned on a dartboard for all your shameless promotion. And
here you were thinking that Ben couldn't be more frustrated with somebody than he usually is.
Oh, I'm just kidding. Scott, I have to say this is the easiest show I've done since I've done the Jet Take. I've talked maybe 20% of the time. It's been amazing because I don't have to deal with Kyle's nonsense. I mean, CJ cursed a bit, but it was fine. Who cares? We're all, I guess I was about to say we're all adults here. I guess technically that's not for a few more months, but we're all mature here, so I'm fine with that. I'm not even talking that much. I love this show, Scott. You are free to co-host any other time you want. I mean, this has been fantastic. So, anyway.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. And listen, you're going to have to come on Play Like a Jet and preview some episodes of the Jet Take. You're welcome to come on and pump up the Jet Take anytime you want. But this week on Play Like a Jet, and listen, Big John and I are looking forward to having you, man. And this week, John and I are going to get into it as we get into week number 3, the third installment of 1988. With Eric McMillan, who is a character, to say the least. And it's funny, I was talking to him last week, and he's like, yo, Scott, I was listening to parts 1 and 2. He's like, man, I am a damn trip when I get going, aren't I? It just made me laugh because he's talking about how when he listens, he goes, yeah, but listen, when I get my competitive side going, I just go crazy. But this week he's going to talk about a stretch where back-to-back weeks he had his very first encounter with 2 of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, 2 guys that ended up in the NFL Hall of Fame. And he's going to tell a story about one of those quarterbacks and his first meeting with that quarterback, his first encounter, I should say, on the field.
Can I take a guess? Wait, so what year was it?
This would have been 1988.
88. So I'm going to say Marino's one of them. Am I correct?
Yeah, it could be.
Oh, you're not gonna spoil it?
No, I mean, I can't if you want me to.
And the person born, if that was 12 years before I was born, which is probably freaky for you to think about. But if I'm just gonna guess, I'm gonna say Marino's one of them, and I want to say Montana, but that would have to line up with us playing the NFC West.
Well, I'll go ahead and say who they were because it doesn't matter. I mean, you could just look it up on the schedule. It was Jim Kelly and Dan Marino.
I should have definitely gotten that. That's two SD's quarter. That's way too easy. Well, I was like, why not make sure? Hey, if you ever do a show, I know you talked about 2008, 2009 seasons, but if you ever do that, the 2008 season was the first year I was ever a diehard Jets fan. So I got those first few years, definitely that Brett Favre year and then the 2 Rex years. Oh, I got those. Those are easy money for me to talk about as far as like, past Jets seasons, which is weird for me to think about because it felt like I just became a Jets fan. It felt like that was that was not that long ago in my mind, but.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, listen. I mean, we did 2008 with Kerry Rhodes, so as we go forward, we may do 2009 and 2010, and we already did 2011. So we'll see what happens with that. But this week with 1988, I'm telling you, when Eric tells this story about one of these quarterbacks, one of these Hall of Fame quarterbacks, and his first meeting with this guy on the field, you are not going to believe the story he tells. It's one of the craziest and funniest stories I've ever heard. In fact, I alluded to this earlier. I had to stop Eric and go, wait a second, what? What? Like, are you being serious right now? Is that for real? And it's actually, I think I told Joe Caparoso I want to put this into like a YouTube clip and upload it, and we'll see if we can get it to go viral. Maybe you and Kyle can help me on that one, but it is insane. And I know, like you said, it was 12 years before you were born, but as I tell Kyle whenever he tries to make me feel old, I say, look, man, my show serves 2 purposes. For the youngsters like yourself and Kyle, it's to help teach you guys the history of the Jets from before you guys were following the team. And for the older fellas like myself and CJ, it's to reminisce and kind of hear cool stories from seasons where we were around or careers or games when we were around, but maybe we didn't have the inside story. We're getting the inside story from somebody that was there at the time. And the beautiful part about talking to Eric is that he just doesn't care about what anybody thinks about what he had to say. I mean, he basically said that Bernie Kosar was a sidearm quarterback that he was not impressed with at all. I mean, we're talking about a guy who was one of the best quarterbacks of the entire decade of the 80s, and Eric's talking about him like he's some scrub replacement level quarterback. So he doesn't care. He says what he really thinks, and boy, oh boy, I promise you, Ben, even though it was 12 years before you were born, when you hear this story that he tells about this Hall of Fame quarterback, you're going to be texting me and going, holy cow, you were right, that story was insane. So make sure you check it out.
Listen to that. Yeah, I'm definitely going to check that out. I recommend all our viewers do. We'll make sure to, when you release it on Friday, we'll make sure to tweet it out from our account. But Scott, I think that's where we're going to end it. We went a long, I think it was 2 hours, that was probably 2 hours and 30 minutes, I guess. A little over that. That was a long show. I don't mind. I think it was actually 2 hours and 38 minutes since we started at 10. But hey, I love it, Scott. We're both talkers. It was fantastic. I loved when CJ came on. As I said, I think we're going to need a 7-second delay next time he comes on, or a bleep button or something. We need something to slow that guy down, but it's fine. I love CJ. I love the fire he brings. He tells it like it is. Yeah, but I mean, as I've said this every time you've come on the show, but I do really admire your podcast. I mean, I know how hard it is to run a podcast just talking about the team. And, I was able to, get home from school today, and I was able to, just write down a few notes, and we can kind of just spitball and talk. But for your show, I mean, you really have to go in depth, prepare everything, because this is stuff that happened, 3 decades ago. So, huge props to you, and I know the amount of work that you do, and you have a full-time job and a mortgage to pay, and you're spending time, and you're hey, I don't have any of that going on for me. So I really admire that, and I know how much work you how much free time you spend doing this. So I admire that. As always, let me get back to our plugs. I'll do this as fast as I can. As always, you can follow us at The Jet Take on Twitter. That's the best place to reach us. You can just tweet at us. We'll follow you. You can DM. We can go at it on Twitter. We love it. Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. We're all over there. If you want to listen to the show, you can go to iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play. You can also find us on Turn on the Jets. Kyle and I are both right there, but our shows are all in there. If you want official Jets tickets, go to the Jets website, use the promo code TheJetTake. You can get discounted tickets to the home opener. That's in a few weeks. That's 2 weeks, so that's next Sunday. Against the Dolphins, you can get to the game against the Falcons or the game against the Jaguars. All right, well, thank you. I think that's all my plugs. But thank you guys for another great episode. As I said at the beginning of the show, I mean, the downloads are really flowing in. I'd like to thank all you guys for just continuously supporting the show. I mean, we've really taken off. And we were doing well, but ever since we joined Turn on the Jets, we've really increased our listens. So thank you to that. Thank you to them, and thank you to you guys for all you new guys listening to the show. Scott,
hey, Ben, if I could say one more thing before, I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It was a blast. You know I love talking to you, so anytime you want to have me on to fill in for Kyle, or if Kyle ever wants me to fill in for you, happy to do it. Thanks for putting up with my rants or whatever, but I really appreciate you guys having me on the guest host, and it's always a blast. And I've told you this every time that I've called in, but I'm really glad that you guys are on board, and I think that you guys are a major asset to TurnOnTheJets.com. So I'm really happy to call in and help out whenever need be, and I look forward to working with you guys throughout the future and into the year 2018 and beyond, when hopefully the Jets get their franchise quarterback.
Yes, I'll be broadcasting live from my college dorm room, finally talking about the Jets having a franchise quarterback. But yeah, Scott, I was about to thank you. I mean, thank you for on short notice filling in for Kyle. Again, Kyle should be back next week for any reason. If he's not, we'll either have Scott, or if Scott can't do it, somebody else. But Scott is our first choice for this co-hosting. I think he's built to just talk, and then I'll just sit back. I love it. It's fantastic. We talk Jets. It's fantastic.
That's Ben's way of saying I talk too much, by the way.
No, I'm not even. Oh, whoa. Hey, Scott, I'm not your girlfriend. I'm not being passive-aggressive here. I am 100% saying I love it. I get to sit back and listen to the Jets, and then I chime in when I want. If I talk for too long, I get too annoying. So no, I'm very okay with you talking a lot. It's better than policing Kyle. So. Again, Scott, thank you so much for thank you so much for hosting the show with me tonight. And we'll probably have to do it in the future. And hopefully we hear for a call-in from you when Kyle's back, so you can bust his chops as well.
Of course. Thank you, Ben. I appreciate it, man.
Hey, it's always our pleasure to have you on the show. I guess we're gonna end it like we end every show with the best chant in the National Football League. We'll talk to you guys next Wednesday, hopefully after a Jets win, but most likely after a Jets loss. Stay strong, Jets fans. As Scott said, your real games are on Saturdays, watching these quarterbacks. But cheer up the young guys to play well, and we'll talk to you guys next Wednesday, 8 o'clock Eastern. If you want to call in, I know some people have had some issues with this. If you want to call in, the number is enter the one before it, since it's I don't know, it's a free conference call. I guess you have to enter 1, but it's 515-739-1285. Enter your PIN code 261860 with the hash sign. We've had some issues with this. If they continue, we might end up switching softwares. But for now, that is the number to call if you want to call in and talk to Kyle and I, you and Scott, whatever. Thank you guys so much for listening to the show, and we will talk to you guys next week.